Good. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our planning meeting. Just to start off, I am Councillor Margaret Glancy, Chair of Planning, and I would like to introduce members present this evening. On my left, we have Councillor Steadman and Councillor Illingworth. We haven't got Councillor Wood yet. I believe he's stuck in traffic, so he may come along later. On my right, I've got Councillor Posnett, who's Vice Chair, Councillor Bindloss, Councillor Smith, who's substitution for Councillor Brown, Councillor Higgins, Councillor Hewson, and Councillor Holmes and Councillor Chandler. So thank you everybody for coming along this evening. We also have a team of officers present. We have the Assistant Director for Planning and Delivery, Mr. Jim Worley, on my left-hand side. We have our Conservation Officer, Toby Ebbs. And down on the far left, we have members of our Democratic Services team taking the minutes, and our planning solicitor, Tom Pickwell, on my right. So thank you everybody for coming along. Some general housekeeping. Emergency exits are on my left. Be grateful if you could assemble away from the building where officers will assist you. Members speaking, as usual, if you could please raise your hand if you wish to speak and use the microphones in front of you, remembering to turn them off and when you're finished. Members voting, it'll be the same as we usually do by raising hands. And just to remind everybody, this meeting is being recorded, and remember it is being live streamed. So I'd be grateful if you could please put your phone onto silent, which I have just done. Thank you. This evening, we have 3 items on our agenda. Before I continue with that, could I just, I've had a request to change the order of the agenda. Could I just double check that Jonathan Weeks from Aitchison Rafferty is here this evening? If you are, could you raise your hand? No, I can't see any hand. Okay, so I think in that we'll have to stay with the original agenda order. I do apologise. Thank you. Right, apologies for absence. Councillor Brown, I have apologies for, and as I've said before, Councillor Smith on my right-hand side is substituting this evening. If we could look at item 2, which is to confirm the minutes of the 22nd of July. Could I please have a proposer?
I'll propose the minutes.
Councillor Posnett. Seconder, Councillor Steadman. Thank you very much. If you could please have a show of hands for those in favour of the minutes. Thank you. That's all in favour apart from Councillor Bindloss and Councillor Smith. Thank you. You're abstaining, I presume, because you weren't there.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. It's taken as read. Thank you. Now the next item is declarations of interest. I'd be grateful if you could please, Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My non-pecuniary interest, but I'm far too close to this application, is on page 39. Thank you. Scorford, yeah. Thank you.
Will you be leaving the room, Councillor Holmes, or not? No, or you can sit in the public gallery.
I won't say anything. I just, but I can go out of the room if you like. It doesn't make any difference to me.
Advise, Councillor? Yeah, probably the public gallery is probably the best placed.
Yeah, all right.
Okay,
there's another thing. I can't put my phone off. It's a new phone, and I can't.
Oh no!
Put I know.
Technology.
So, I know. I just don't know how to do it.
Oh, is that Mr. Weeks? Could I just inquire of the person that's just come in? Are you Mr. Weeks?
No, I'm Stevens.
Okay, thank you. We're just looking for a gentleman who's not turned up yet. Thank you. Councillor Steadman.
Sorry, yes, I will have to declare an interest on 20-01107 full. I was asked to pass comment by the planning officer and I did. So I've been asked to step down.
Will you be sitting in the public gallery?
I'll probably sit outside
Okay,
or the public
thank you.
gallery.
Councillor Posnett?
Just my usual one as a member of Leicestershire County Council.
Could be the person we're waiting for. Are you Jonathan Weeks? Right, that's coming at the 11th hour. Thank you. Do I have to? Councillor Higgins, you have your hand raised. Thank you.
Thank you. Well spotted, Solicitor. Yes, I don't have any interest at all, but for 4.320 stroke 01233 FUL, Somerby Methodist Church, as the ward council, I'll be speaking on behalf of residents who've contacted me on that application. So I'll be not taking the vote and speaking for the 3 minutes. Thank you.
We've had a request to alter the order, the order of the paper this evening, and I'd request to bring item 4.3 as the first item on the agenda. So if we could, I'm sorry to put you under pressure as you've just arrived, but if we could have that one first, I'd be very grateful. Okay, thank you. So sorry to alter the order of the agenda, but the first item we're going to hear this evening is item 4.3, which is 20/01233 full, conversion of former Methodist church to a 3-bedroom dwelling, High Street, Somerby. And I do apologise. I'm going to hand over now to Toby Ebbs, who will address the committee. And sorry for the short notice again. You were obviously waiting for 4.3.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
no
sorry.
problem. Do you want to show it on the screen? Oh, okay. So I haven't been here for a while.
Councillor Higgins, are you going to sit in the public gallery or are you going to address? We're doing 4.3 first.
I can do whichever you want. It's a bit full in the public gallery though. I
It is.
can sit back there if you
Obviously.
prefer, but I'm just writing at the moment.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so presenting this application, which is for a change of use from a religious place of worship and community building to a residential property. Just taking you through the plans. If you could go to the next slide, please, and just have a look at the elevations. There are only marginal modest changes proposed, which wouldn't have an impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area. And then if you could also go down again, please. Looking at the site plan, it is a very modest proposal with regards to footprint and scale. And then finally, the relevant neighbourhood plan policy CF1 for Somerby Parish Council, which is relevant to the retention of existing community assets, as well as Melton local plan policy C7. They are much in the same in that they state that if there is not an alternative proposed community facility within the locality, then the application should be refused. Before I go any further, I'd just like to point out that actually the building is no longer an asset of community value in that it is no longer on the register. It was removed from the register, and this is an admin error on my behalf. In the committee report, it states that it's still an asset of community value formally, but that's not the case. So just have to point that out. So in summary, the application was submitted over 2 years ago, and the use of the building had been for religious places of worship, but also for community groups. There were various community groups that used the building. When the Methodist Church was sold to the applicant, it's been 2 years now, and there hasn't been a group that has come forwards, a community group to come forwards to express an intention to purchase the building. this time has expired and we're now here at the Planning Committee. I was faced with Melton Local Plan Policy C7 and the Somerby Neighbourhood Plan CF1, which states that you must have an alternative facility available in order to approve it, the planning application for change of use, and it should be refused if there isn't. So therefore, I went to the Village Hall Committee. I spoke to the Village Hall and asked them if they had availability there for these community groups which had been displaced from the building. They advised that there was capacity in that building. I also then engaged, I've been continually engaging with the parish council throughout this. They advised that they didn't think there was sufficient capacity in the village hall. So I was left with a bit of a difficulty and therefore had to seek a compromise as a resolution, and therefore went to the developer in line with our department and head of services. And we agreed for a developer contribution to be made to the village hall of £10,000, subject to a Section 106 agreement for the improvement of the village hall, as this was the only way I could find some kind of a compromise and resolution to this problem, in that there were no willing community groups coming available to come forwards to purchase the building. The applicant was accepted the request for £10,000. This then went out to a formal reconsultation to all parties. There were 7 letters of support that came in after that reconsultation, and there was no further comment from the original objectors, of which there were 14 objectors to the original application. So I didn't receive anything further from those objectors or any of the community groups who had originally objected. So it then was down to the parish council and their views on the matter, and that has taken some thought and consideration. It came in, their views, after the publication of the committee report, and the parish council, the chair of the parish council, is going to speak tonight about that. And the final view, the final verdict was that the application could be supported, the £10,000, with a majority favouring to support this and therefore to remove their objection, but that would be subject to the nuances of the Section 106 agreement, because that Section 106 agreement would have to be carefully planned and articulated to ensure that the money is ring-fenced. It could not be used for other means, and so therefore perhaps that would be something for the committee to discuss if they were minded to approve this application. And with that, I don't think there's anything further to say on the subject, so I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Do members have any quick questions of Toby before we start here and leave it to the speakers? Nope. Okay. The first speaker this evening is Councillor Carl Powell from Somerby Parish Council.
Yeah, okay, got it. Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, my name's Carl Powell. I'm the chair of Somerby Parish Council. We've found this planning application, to say the least, difficult. We're trying to balance the need to comply with neighbourhood plan policies by providing equivalent provision to this lost building if the application was to be approved. We're trying to balance that against the undesirability of an empty building. By a majority, the parish council think this can be achieved by building a small storeroom on the back of the existing village hall. Now, this is quite a leap of imagination. What we're saying we'll accept is approximately a 27 square metre storeroom to offset the loss of nearly 200 square metres of community building, garden, toilets, car parking, plus the main meeting room. So we're really not asking for very much. The second stretch for us is that the £10,000 developer contribution on offer would not pay for that. It would pay for at most 25% of the cost of this 27 square metre storeroom. However, we're being realistic, we're being constructive, we don't want an empty building. We can support the application if, but only if, sufficient flexibility is attached to the way that we can use that £10,000. In particular, it wouldn't be a problem. We would welcome the money being ring fenced for improvements to the village hall, but we couldn't accept being constrained only to spend it on building that storeroom, because we quite simply do not know if we will ever raise the other 30 or £40,000 that we would need to do that. So we need flexibility to make some smaller improvement if, unfortunately, we couldn't raise enough to build that extension. Secondly, a time limit would be very difficult for us to accept, because to be blunt, we've got an awful lot of fundraising to embark on, grants, loans, raffles, whatever, to have any chance of building this extension on the back. So we do support the application, but we can only do that if the developer contribution allows us sufficient flexibility to be sure that the community can benefit from it. If it's too constrained, then we would have to ask for the application to be refused. That's all I've got to say. Of course, I'm available for questions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Members, do we have any questions of the speaker? No? Oh, yeah, Councillor Illingworth.
Yeah, I appreciate the dilemma. Have you made any tentative inquiries as to possible grant funding for the balance or another contribution?
One possibility we're aware of is I forgot its proper name. There is a county council community fund. That's exactly it. Thank you. Where potentially we could apply for £10,000. Another possibility that the village hall, I think, have looked into before, a possibility is lottery funding. The difficulty here is that these things have to be match funded, and £10,000 doesn't match fund very much. Typically, it might fund another £10,000, leaving us with still at least 50% of the cost to raise. But we're advised that we must be reasonable in our requests, and so we're not opposing the application. We think with sufficient flexibility, we could usefully use that £10,000 to benefit the community.
Just a quick question. The £10,000, would you be using that if you don't use it for the storeroom? Could that be used to divide up your village hall in any way so that you could have quiet areas, etc., within the village hall?
Yeah, the village hall committee, they had a professional round looking at that. They've considered that possibility and don't think it would be very helpful. That was one earlier idea we had that would cost less than this extension. You just have to see inside the building, really. There's no way really of dividing the main room without cutting half of it off from the kitchen and toilets and amenities. You'd have to go through the other half to get to the kitchen, for example. So, yeah, if forced, if that was the best that we could have, yes, some kind of partitioning is a plan B, yes.
So Chandler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The flexibility you're talking about is puzzling me a little bit. Have we got to put a date on this, or how can we do this? Because a 106, I mean, it can be held by the council. I think I'm right in saying that, Mr. Worley, aren't I?
Yeah, we're talking, I think, in colloquial terms, saying it's money for the village hall. It would actually come to the council and be passported on. It's within our gift. And indeed, you can give instructions like if this is the route we're going to determine that time period. There's nothing set that we have to follow.
That's me. Anyway, thank you.
Oh, sorry, do you want me to? Yes. So, I mean, Mr. Wallace just said something I believed was the case, but wasn't sure of, that you can potentially request this 106 contribution without a time limit. And that's what we would like. I mean, we're sincere, and not so much me, actually, the Village Hall Committee sat behind me. We've done an awful lot of work to try and come up with a viable design for this extension. They're competent, experienced, charitable trustees who successfully raised money before. It's just that I can't sit here and say, I am absolutely certain that they will raise the other 30,000, 40,000 pounds to build this extension. And we need, if they can, it might take a long while. And if they can't, then we need flexibility to make some smaller improvement, the best we can manage with what money we can get, if that helps you, councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes?
You did mention something about a garden parking area. Are we talking about the building that's now been sold? Is that because my colleague here and I went and looked, we actually looked inside, we had the opportunity because the owner of it now was actually there, so it was just lucky. So are we, I'm very puzzled by all this, because it's supposed to be, you want it as a community asset, but you couldn't raise the money to do it, and then it went, all the money went to the chapel, didn't it? It says so in the Melton Times. I'm reading here as well.
That wasn't me.
Right, I'm just a bit puzzled as to the problems with this.
Okay, the plot of land, the whole of it, according to the planning application, is 292 square metres. Actually, to be honest, I think it's less. I think it's more like 190. I suspect a typo for the whole lot of it. In addition to the building, there's sufficient parking for 2 cars in front of it that does form part of that curtilage. You know, it's part of the whole proposal. And at the back, which you might not have seen, there's a door at the back, a short flight of steps, and I'd call it a patio garden. Like, it's perhaps 2 metres wide at one end and 3 metres wide at the other. It's not, I couldn't really call it a garden, but I mean, it's a useful space. When the building's used in the summer, you can open the door at the back, you can step outside, people can have a cigarette, people can look at the gardens. There's just about space for a few chairs and a couple of little tables. It is a usable outdoor space, but not large. And then your second question about community right to bid process.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was...
Yeah. The building went through the community right to bid process. It was correctly run by Melton MBC, and we've got absolutely no criticism of them at all. But it was offered at market rate as at a development opportunity price, on the assumption it would get planning permissions, £175,000, which no one in the village came even close to being able to raise. It's important not to confuse its registration as an asset of community value, which does only one thing. It allows you 6 months to try and raise the money, not to confuse that with what the local plan and neighbourhood plan policies say. You know, they're nothing to do with it being an asset of community value under the Localism Act. They're just saying that if it's lost, it should be replaced with equivalent or better provision elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hewson, did you have your hand raised?
On the extension costs, have you had sort of some serious proper quotes on that to work from?
No, we've tried, and more particularly the Village Hall Committee have tried. There was, although we, as long ago as December, offered to speak with the developer, they declined to, and have declined to since, or to attend any meetings with us or that we were at. There was no suggestion of any developer contribution at all until verbally on the 10th of July and in writing on the 12th of July. Toby might correct me, but I think I'm right there. So we didn't know anything about any £10,000 until the 10th or 12th of July. The Village Hall Committee have been very proactive. They've had, and they can't speak to correct me, but they've had a building surveyor around who says this idea of an extension is viable. They've had an architect round, and they've gone as far as asking someone for a quote. The buildings, between the building surveyor and the architect, they estimated it would cost something £40,000 to £50,000, but that's not a quote yet. You just can't get a building surveyed, plans drawn, and a quote that quickly. We tried.
Thank you. All the questions? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker this evening is Davina Bates on behalf of the Somerby Parish Objectors Community. Oh, don't worry.
Thank you, councillors. I'm Davina Bates, the parishioner of Somerby and the chair coordinator of the Parish Community Hub. Something of a surprise to recognise that the asset of community value is no longer applicable. However, it isn't usual for a Methodist church to be advertised as a development opportunity. So therefore, its valuation didn't chime with it being sold as an unused Methodist church. But it has been bought, and obviously it is under new ownership. But this comes along at a time when there are to be considerable planning application approvals, which will give Somerby as a village 30% roughly increase in population, and it brings 40 plus new homes to us. When I looked at the planning officer's report, he gives a small amount of uses that the chapel in a community context has been involved with, but over something like 60 years, it was built and brought into the community in 1958. The two buildings have worked in harmony and in cooperation, and it isn't all villages that have the opportunity to have two different buildings that make their own different contributions to their community. The village hall obviously can host very large gatherings, large fundraising efforts, and many more things that require a large space. And in addition to that, it's a considerable contribution to the village in that it provides space for the primary school that is at capacity in pupils. It's almost there with its 50 pupil limit, and it does need a big space for some of its curricular activities. So the village hall makes a considerable contribution, but so has the chapel in a very different kind of context. It's a very small room, which small groups have had the benefit of more recently because with the help of local government and funding, the chapel did introduce computer technology in about 2013. So it provides a very different, first, a kind of service-based model, I suppose we would say, about that. And both of those things make their different contributions. In addition to what I've said about the village hall, it has wonderful both musical and sound resources, and has produced pantomimes and various things that have made a social contribution in ways that a small building cannot do that.
Have you?
So
Sorry, your 3
going
minutes is up.
back-
Sorry to interrupt you. Your 3 minutes is up.
going back to the fact that we're going to have an increase in population, it does make myself as a person wonder. Oh, it does make me wonder whether we need an extra house on the high street when so many others are planned, and it will take away a long-standing community asset. And if you've read the Melton Times, you will see that that was bought by fundraising by the community and is for the community. So I feel we could have had a rather different approach in maintaining both of those buildings and working towards a singular way forward, bearing in mind the expansion that's expected.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Do we have any questions at all? Members? No? Okay, thank you. Our next speaker this evening is Jonathan Weeks from Aitchison Rafferty. If you'd like to come to the table, please. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And apologies for running in at the last minute. Traffic was horrific. I was going to say, yes, the application has obviously been quite emotive within the village. And I think it's worth just sort of clarifying. There's been a lot of dialogue which has gone on as expressed by the case officer. And yes, Summerby Methodist Church was designated as an asset of community value. There is a process which had to be gone through in order to allow it to be sold and disposed of, so that it is no longer on that register. So as I said, it went through the correct process. No community group came forward to be able to purchase it. It didn't have to be at the figure which was actually stated. Any bid could have been made. No bid was tabled, and therefore it was perfectly acceptable to be sold to a private party, which happened to be the applicant. But as it isn't an asset of community value, it's no longer protected under this legislation. Now, the church itself actually closed in October 2019 after, as I understand, dwindling congregations, that often there was only a couple of people who was going there, and very, very little use, as in not many different groups for the community side of things, so that they closed the church and took that option because it wasn't viable. Now, one of the reasons as to why you can lose a facility within the policy, and that's the neighbourhood plan policy, is if a building is not viable for use. Well, clearly you need more than 2 people as a congregation to keep a church running, and you need more than just a handful of groups at £10 or £12 an hour renting it out to actually even cover the cost of the heat for it. In terms of the number of people using it as well, as has been said, it's a low number. It was a low number, and the people who actually run the facility directly opposite have said, we can accommodate them. So there is an alternative venue to accommodate the needs, which is the second point within policy, which says you can lose a facility if those two aspects are actually covered. Now, as part of that, if we wanted to be really difficult, we could say we don't have to give a contribution at all. But the client is trying to be very reasonable here, or the applicant is trying to be very reasonable, and is quite happy to give a financial contribution, and they are quite happy to give that across at £10,000 without a time limit attached to it. You can write to the Section 106 to make sure that it's not got a time limit imposed in terms of when it needs to be spent. And it can be written in a flexible enough way to say that as long as it's built on improvement and enhancement to Somerby Village Hall opposite, to allow the flexibility as to what that is actually spent on. So it will provide a long-term benefit to that facility opposite, which I think in reality we can all say is actually the bigger, better facility, and will then help to actually protect that facility for the foreseeable future for the benefit of the whole of the village. So hopefully you can look to support your officer's view and go with his recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, members? Nope. Oh, actually, yes, we do have. Yes, Councillor Illingworth.
I was debating, but then I thought I would just to float the idea. The £10,000 contribution. Would you hazard a guess that the size of the extension that the village hall are envisaging and its usage as a storeroom? Would you? What's your thoughts about that £40,000 to £50,000 cost? Because it strikes me as quite a lot. And I'm just wondering if instead of giving the village hall £10,000, while people are on site doing that building work, across the road, that extension couldn't be put up for significantly less than going out to the open market for a contractor to do it separately. Has anybody thought of that option? And what's your view on 40 to 50, or don't you have one?
Yeah, there we go. I was going to say, obviously, I've not seen any of the plans to know exactly what the cost would be, and I'm sure it would always depend exactly how it's being built or what it's being built of as to what the costs are. But I know a general rule of thumb is to suggest that it's usually about £1,000 to £1,200 a square metre if you're building something of a reasonable spec. So I would have thought it may well come in below the suggested 40 to 50,000, but obviously without seeing any details on that, I can't obviously confirm that. I mean, within that, obviously, and I know the comments which we sort of said, and I've not been in the village hall to know what the layouts are, but one thing, and it may well be that they have actually looked at it, is if it was subdivided, and the comment was made that you can't get to the kitchen and toilet facilities, well, could you put a second set of kitchen or toilet facilities in to actually make that work? There's potentially a lot of different options as to how it could work from that perspective. In terms of the thought of could basically the developer build that extension for them, I don't believe that has been tabled as a thought, and I think it's one of those ones that potentially it starts to get quite convoluted and difficult to be able to actually secure something like that under a Section 106, because obviously it's works which are off-site, and at the moment we haven't got a fixed cost or plan as to what they would be. So it's almost then trying to hold the applicant to ransom as to the whim of what the local village hall may decide that they actually want. I'm not suggesting that they would be unreasonable, but I'm just saying in terms of the sort of way in which applications and things should be determined, to suddenly give effectively all of the power across to a third party doesn't seem particularly fair.
Thank you for that. I understand that. Yes, it maybe just needs a bit of enlightened thinking down the line, possibly. Hey ho. Thank you.
Thank you. No other questions? No. Okay. Thank you very much. The final person speaking on this matter is the ward councillor, Councillor Higgins.
Okay, right. Okay, thank you, committee. The policy C7 for rural services, the second part of the local plan policy we have here says the proposal must demonstrate that consideration has been given to the reuse of the premises for an alternative community business or facility, and that efforts have been made to try to secure such reuse. That's not before you today, hasn't even been explored. There's no been feasibility study to suggest that. So it doesn't meet policy C7. Policy CF1, if we want to play around with the words, then you might squeeze it through. But I think that's trying to drive a coach and horses through the Somerby's neighbourhood plan there, because this all business is just, you know, well, it's how you want to look at that. But I don't think, and if you read the principle of the first paragraph, that this application is trying to meet what the community of Somerby are after here. And I think £10,000 to me is far too low to compensate those groups that have been displaced. And there is a question, have the Methodists actually, you know, have they broke equality laws? Because they have displaced a load of people who have retired as well, and probably been more isolated through their behaviour on this application, not on this application, but selling the chapel. Alec Wilson, who's the chairman of the Friends of the 10th, has literally spoken to me today that the Friends of the 10th are committed to a physical presence in Somerby and would consider the chapel to be such presence. They don't feel that they've been thoroughly negotiated with, as do the community hub, which Davina Bates, happy birthday, by the way, Davina. They don't feel that they've been fully communicated with on this. There's been a lot of talk with the village hall, but no plans are in front of you or me to show what that actually looks like. What does this £10,000 look like? So it seems to me that this is rushed to get to this committee. And latterly, I don't normally criticise the officers or Toby in particular, but I called Toby to say that this was a very sensitive application and I needed to be consulted all the way through. You won't see my comments on there because I wasn't asked. Also, I had no consultation about this £10,000. I did call to ask what the Section 106 was, and I was told it would be brought back to me, but I never heard anything formally from the officers. So I don't feel that I've been consulted as ward member at all. So I'm asking for a deferment at the moment. Also with the applicant, to work with the applicant, because the applicant's never contacted me, the agent's never contacted me. And unfortunately, I don't feel, when this offer came in August, I believe, that I've been consulted or worked with at all. And I think we'll let the community down if we permit this tonight, because you only have one chance. So let's see what we can get for the community of Somerby. Thank you.
Thank you. I've been quite generous. You were over your 3 minutes. But thank you. Any questions of Councillor Higgins? Councillor Steadman.
Yeah, I was just looking back to my notes actually, and Mrs. Bates said that this chapel was actually bought with community funds raised by the people of Somerby. Is that correct?
I have seen Trevor Hornbuckle in here. He called me at the weekend. So Trevor, if I get this wrong, you can kick me afterwards. But I believe his aunt and a lot of his family members, because I've spoken to Trevor over many years, and they bought like paper bricks, I believe, or whatever that was. I don't, maybe some committee members know what paper bricks are all about. So the community raised the funds for this chapel and built it. So a lot of the Methodists feel that they own this. For whatever reason, that's not taken place. The Methodists will have to answer for that. And I am critical of how they processed the sale of it. But that's not for planning.
Any other questions? Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Surely, Mr. Higgins, this has moved on. The chapel no longer belongs to the Methodists, it belongs to the applicant. So we've got a legal problem here, haven't we?
Yeah, well, it belongs to the applicant. It was registered as asset community value, and the Somerby CF7 policy and the C7 policy that the Melton local plan was in place. The Somerby draft plan was also in place when it was purchased, and it is obviously up to the owner of any facility, or caveat emptor, buyer beware. It would be for the applicant to demonstrate they meet these policies. I don't believe they meet policy C7, and I don't really believe they meet policy CF7, because £10,000 for, I think it's 130 square feet of chapel into 30 square feet of extension. And I think even the agent said that there's lots of other things that we just don't know at this moment, and that's why I just don't think we can make this decision tonight.
Councillor Steadman, you have another question?
Last one, Councillor Higgins, I promise. Did you actually say that you are in negotiations with all of the community groups associated with the chapel and the village hall and the applicant?
So the two community groups, Friends of the 10th, yes. The community hub, which Vic Alsop, who couldn't be here tonight, and Davina Bates, yes. There was a yoga and Pilates class in there, but then because the place closed now, that particular person does those classes now in Twyford, so it's not in the Somerby parish. So not with those. The applicant has never got in touch, or the agent, with me as ward councillor, and while I think the village hall is doing the right thing, and I think they are trying to do the right thing, and I do applaud the officer working with the village hall, but I've been blinded to those negotiations, and I haven't been asked for my view. And the Friends of the 10th and the community hub feel that they haven't been as part of it, but I am assured by the officers that they were, but I can only go what they tell me.
Any questions, Councillor Holmes? Oh, Councillor Hewson first, was it? Thank you.
Just one question then, through the chair, does the CV Church have any facilities for any community work?
I might get this wrong, but I don't believe so. Other than the church building itself, and some churches are doing some fabulous stuff. Borough Hill Church is hosting music at the moment and things like that. I don't think the church would be able to do a community, what the community hub do, and the Friends of the 10th. When they've done displays, and what they're thinking is some kind of museum, and they do raise lots of funds at the moment. I mean, they're quite powerful in how much money they do raise at the Friends of the 10th Memorial at Borough Hill. So they're not leaving the Somerby villages. I don't think that the church is the alternative, unfortunately. But this is about, can the village hall cope with it? And what I'm saying to you is we don't really know what that's going to look like, because there's lots of ifs, buts and maybes. And I don't think £10,000 is quite a reflection on it. Bearing in mind a 3-bedroom bungalow in Somerby probably will sell for in excess of £350,000, probably more.
Councillor Holmes, did you want to ask a question?
Thank you. It's about the same question I was going to ask as well, because in my village there was a small chapel, and I think Councillor Hewson would know as well that sometimes chapel and church mix together. So that is an asset which we've only got one now, and sometimes it's best that way. The other thing is this £10,000 keeps getting to me, because if it seems to me that the building had actually housed 2 cars for parking and then storage, and that's what we're going on about. And £10,000 would certainly buy a self-store thing, whatever. It would easily buy that. And I'm not trying to say we're doing the wrong thing or anything, but I do wonder, I really do wonder whether really the village hall would like to have another room as well as storage. You know, I can't quite get the £10,000, if you understand.
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point there, Councillor Holmes, is from memory, and I don't know if councillors were invited to go into the village hall, because I think then you would start to appreciate what's being offset here. And I think you're right, I think there's a container at the back of the car park for the village hall for some kind of storage, but you want things to be aesthetically pleasing as well. You don't want just great big shipping containers. But it is about having two rooms. So because the main reason the chapel was used was because Pilates and yoga and the community hub were doing things and the parish council would say this if they were in the chair, they were doing things at the same time when another event was taking place in the village hall. And so you can't have that separation. So I think, which is a very welcome offer of 10,000, and I don't throw that away lightly at all, because I think this is probably the way we have to try and find a way through these problems. But is £10,000 enough to accommodate disaffected groups or groups that have been displaced and get two rooms in the hall? I think even Councillor Cole Powell was saying there's lots of ifs, buts and maybes here, and that's why, because if you give the permission tonight, then we are where we are. Where I'm asking for, I would rather a deferment, and let's have a proper chat with the applicant, with some of the displaced groups, with the village hall, where we're all knowing what's in front of us, and we're all in a collective agreement. Now, if the chapel can't be saved for community facilities, it has to close. But what we don't want is that the village hall doesn't get some kind of upgrade, because that's just going to be a travesty.
Any other questions? No. Thank you very much, Councillor Higgins. Okay. Would you like to come back on anything you've heard from the speakers this evening?
Yeah, if I can pick up some of these strands, please. And to act as my prompt, could we get the policy back up that you showed for Councillor Higgins? I just want to probe this a little bit further and apply it to the circumstances. But first, just a brief note why it's that policy on the screen, not CF7 that Councillor Higgins mentioned. The reason for that is the summary local plan postdates our local plan, so this takes precedence where they're slightly out of kilter, and they are only slightly out of kilter, by the way. We're not being pulled in completely opposite directions. So the first half of that policy is where this suggestion of a 106 comes in, and to my mind, it's all homing in on the word suitable. The story of this is that the groups, the village hall has always been there, and the initial reaction is, why can't you just go across the road? And then the groups explained to us some of what you've heard in the last half hour about the nuances of their need, about the intimacy of the rooms and two activities going on at once, and so on and so on. So the idea of the contribution is to adapt the village hall so it can meet with those very nuanced and specific needs. Just picking up from the very beginnings of the debate, including the question of flexibility. Certainly, if we go down this road, I'm quite happy that a 106 is flexible. What we need to be really careful of, though, is that it's faithful to its purpose. You know, the 106 must never deviate so far that it ceases to address the problem it's trying to solve. So we couldn't go as far as this suddenly morphing into play equipment down the road or something like that, and certainly not to another village. It would still need to be the problem solver that it's being billed as in the first place. And if I can also pick up some of the points around the quantity, the 10,000 compared to the overall costs. You heard from, I think it was Mrs. Bates, most clearly, that the improvements to the village hall are not just about these groups, they're about future-proofing it for the growing population and the range of activities they want to accommodate. So therefore it has to be a contribution, not the whole cost. Otherwise it's paying for solutions to problems that it's not creating. And again, the first principle of 106 is it's about clearing up your own mess, not somebody else's, meeting the needs that you create rather more formally. So that's my comments on the first half. Now, just moving to the bottom half of that policy, and you'll see that that's my emphasis applied there. The word or, so it's or, not and, or if the service or facility is not viable. And this, to my mind, Mr. Powell was quite correct that ACV legislation and planning legislation shouldn't be conflated. But to my mind, this is where they collide, basically. And I think ACV and the story of this property has a role here in terms of the future viability of the property. So the story is the Methodists closed it and walked away into the sunset. So they're out of the equation now. As you heard, it then went through the ACV purchase process, the moratorium and the opportunity for bids to be laid. None came forward. And then it was legitimately sold to the current applicant. So my reading of, and he's not in any mood to be giving it back to the community and isn't compelled to do so because that time's come and gone. So there's, to my mind, there's no way it'll ever get back to community use. We need to talk about community use in the past tense. I know some people are using the present tense, but it's already gone. To my mind, it's already gone. We're talking in the past tense, and there's no mechanism by which it's going to come back. So my view is that we're into the second half of that policy as well, in terms of no longer being viable.
Yeah, if I could just add a couple more points on that. Firstly, apologies if there's been any communication issues. It's never been my intention to withhold any information. I relish engagement with all parties. And secondly, the most important thing in my mind in this application is that when I contacted the Village Hall to ask if they had availability to accommodate those groups, they said yes, they do have space to accommodate those groups. And therefore, the reason why we've come this far is because of the need to engage with the parish council and to respect the virtue of the neighbourhood plan. That's why we've reached this level. But the Village Hall Committee clearly stated they do have capacity to accommodate those groups. And that is without any regard to any financial contribution.
Of course you can.
They talked about applying for grants, and I will declare my interest because the Shire grants are part of my portfolio at the County Council. So I don't want anybody to think I'm touting for business or favouring anybody, because that's not true. But that £10,000, when they talk about match funding, could that not be used for match funding when they're applied for grants if match funding was required?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, and this probably brings us on to the debate about its longevity as well, and whether you want to be specifying that it should be actually quite long term to allow these opportunities to be found and pursued. Again, if this is the road we're going down. 5 years is often associated with 106. It's almost become a habit, I think but it doesn't have to be 5 years. It can be of our own making.
Well, we seem to have ventured into questions of officers, so. No, yeah, but you're okay, don't worry.
I thought I was right.
No. Yeah. I'm glad you clarified that, because I was wondering as well. Do you have any other questions of officers before we start the debate? Councillor Holmes.
Madam Chairman, could I ask the solicitor, because we seem to be in a problem here, whether this is now a long way further from the community, or it is just from what Mr. Worley said, it is just a planning application. I think you get what I'm saying. You understand?
No, sorry, not quite. Can you just rephrase the question specifically? What you're asking?
As Mr. Worley has said, that we have gone a long way past community and whether we could get more money and all that sort of thing. We are now just in, as far as I can see, and I think I understand, that is now just merely a planning application.
Yeah, sorry, I think I understand what you're saying. I think the point is that the policy is what needs to be considered that Mr. Worley had on the slide. That's where the community use comes into play. The ACV parts that have been mentioned throughout the meeting don't really bear any relevance now. They're useful by way of background of the site to understand where it's come from. But there's been a relevant disposal that's finished. It's not been re-nominated as far as I'm aware, and it's certainly not been relisted, and therefore there's no relevance of the ACV. But certainly it's the policy that's got the community use and that needs to be taken into consideration. Whether you deem that now to be further down the line will be part of your consideration of how well that policy applies in terms of its viability and whether that use is still there. Does that answer the question?
Any other questions? No. Right, over to you, members. Who wants to be first? Councillor Steadman, you could rely on you.
Yeah, that's only because Councillor Higgins is sitting out. I don't know, policy CF1, alternative venues that can be adapted. Well, yeah, but as we heard from Councillor Powell, the village hall in its current state isn't suitable as an alternative venue to suit the needs of the community, the parish hub and the 10th. And I don't think £10,000 will make the village hall suitable either, equivalent. So it's not going to be an equivalent or a better provision. Are there adequate alternative provisions within the settlement at this moment in time? No, it doesn't appear that there are. But I'm quite confident that if Councillor Higgins is in negotiations with the village hall, the agent and the community groups that use the chapel, that they could probably find a lot better compromise than what we see before us at the moment. I'm not going to propose anything at the minute, so I shall wait for further debate from some of you, if that's possible.
Anybody else? Councillor Posner.
But I'm sure, I don't know whether it's just me that has been thick, and it could possibly be, but surely this has gone by that debate now. Somebody owns that property, and what we're looking at tonight is converting a Methodist church into a house. Or am I wrong?
Yeah, that is the application, but it brings to the table these policies. So yeah, we do need to delve in.
Councillor Posner.
Right, well, in that case, if that's what we're looking at, which is an application to convert a Methodist chapel into a house, then I would propose that we go ahead. But we do it with some riders on it that the village hall committee can be supported in applying for grants, and that way they could use that £10,000 to probably get something that is more viable to them than what just £10,000 on its own is. So I would propose that you know, the building has been bought, it's for planning permission to turn a chapel into a house, and I propose that we approve it.
Do you want some flexibility within the section 106 until funds can be secured, or another alternative?
The 106 money should come to Melton Council, and we should be consulted on how that money can be used.
Have a seconder now, Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The problem I've had with this debate is the fact that the applicant, as I see it, purchased this perfectly legitimately, and he's the legal owner. And I can't see how we can start arguing that this should have been done and that should have been done. If the community asset was thrown out, nobody came forward with a bid, and then it was put on the open market and he came forward with a bid, surely that meets with the law. And I can't see how we can really do anything but look at this as an application of a conversion of a Methodist chapel into a bungalow. And as such, I will second Councillor Posner. I mean, correct me, perhaps the solicitor would like to correct me if I'm wrong over the legal standing.
No, there's nothing further I can add on that.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
Personally, I'm in agreement with Councillor Steadman. I feel like there hasn't been a suitable alternative provided. The village hall clearly isn't big enough. So I would propose a deferment to allow Councillor Higgins to negotiate with the developers to see if there's a more suitable compromise.
Oh, I think we'll have to continue with the first motion through.
Sorry,
And then,
jumping the
yeah,
gun
so-
a bit.
But thank you. Please bear with us. Councillor Bindloss.
Thank you, Chair. Nobody wants to see a community resource lost at any time. But the bottom line is that it is lost in that it's an empty building now, and it will remain an empty building. The parish council have asked for flexibility, and I understand that that's what's going to be on the cards. And I honestly, you know, I have to agree that I can't see. It's an empty building. It needs developing. That we've gone beyond the point of actually debating whether, you know, that is enough. I think that money could be used. That £10,000 can actually be used as a way of match funding for something in the future. And I'm quite certain that there will be the support to be able to apply for that. Thank you.
Councillor Steadman, you want to come back?
Yeah, I'd just say at this moment in time, I can't support a proposal to permit this. Somerby's neighbourhood plan is a very newly made neighbourhood plan. I'm sure they are very protective of their policies. I think, as Councillor Higgins has said, that he was brought to the table very late in the day and has only just started his negotiations with the groups, the village hall and the agent. And, you know, I personally would like to give him the opportunity to see those negotiations through as the ward councillor.
Councillor Holmes?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As I asked the solicitor in the first place, have we gone too far? Unfortunately, I think we have gone too far. I don't know what else we can do about it. We can't go back when somebody's bought it. Presumably they paid for it and bought it, have they not? You know, they must have paid for it, they bought it. The chapel is benefiting by 100 and something thousand, or the chapels that were. We can't do anything about it. And you can say policy this, policy that, but if it went to appeal, you could well imagine what had happened. I mean, I don't like bringing up appeals, but it's been sold. We have had for many years appeals, and I've got the Melton Times here about the our hospital on Ankle Hill. That was bought, a penny into everybody's wages. Everybody gave a penny. That's what, for years and years and years, to the Dalgleish building, which was Colonel Dalgleish's. I'm just bringing history up here, but what could we do about it? We couldn't. And honestly, I think that there is nothing we now can do. We are trying to shut the stable door when the horse is bolted. And I would have to go with a proposal with an agreement to propose this. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, put your hand.
Thank you. I don't think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think neither myself nor Councillor Steadman are suggesting that we take the property back off the people that have purchased it. I think both of us just want a little bit more support for the community and a bit further negotiation on what can be done to improve the services that are offered by the village hall.
Thank you. Point made. Oh, sorry, Councillor Illingworth, I didn't spot you then.
That's all right. I only just that second put my hand up, no problem. I find myself in a bit of a dilemma on this one because I understand the logic and the fact that the due process has gone through. But I can't agree that there's nothing left for us to do. There's always something left for us to do. I'm not a fan of deferrals generally. They're a bit of a cop-out sometimes. But it gets breathing space for what's been identified as some quite legitimate concerns and issues. But even as I say that, I'm not 100% sure which way to go. It is a dilemma. One thing is for sure, once we grant it, we won't get anything more than we're being offered. If we don't, we might. And I think keeping options open is sometimes a good idea. I'm still weighing it up. I'd apologise, Chair.
Anybody else? No. Well, we've had a motion to permit with, sorry? Yes, of course you can.
Sorry, I think we're going to talk about the motion to permit. Can I just clarify what that motion is and what conditions are attached to that regarding section 106 and whether that's going to be delegated to officers to decide or whether members want to put those conditions on now in terms of the use, the amount and the time limit to spend that, if you so wish to include one.
Could I ask the proposer what they would like?
Yeah, so the question is whether on this motion to permit, whether it sounds like that's subject to section 106 agreements, whether you want to delegate that to officers to negotiate and complete the 106, or whether you want to specify those terms now in terms of the use of the money, the amount of the money, and any time limit should you wish to put a time limit on that 106.
I think that the 106 money, the £10,000 should be delegated to officers of this council to hold that money so that it can be used for the purpose it was given for. And as Jim said, the time limit is usually 5 years, but we can extend it. And I think that's a decision that officers would be better placed to make than members, because they will have had the dealings with what's going to happen.
The seconder happy with that, Councillor Chandler?
Yeah, yes, Madam Chairman, as long as it's ring fenced for the village hall. That's,
yes, indeed. That's yeah. Well, it would have to be with it being section 106 anyway. Thank you. Right, so we've had a motion to permit with the added bonus of the section 106 10,000 to be held by the council and officers to sort of safeguard that, and you will review it again, won't you, in 5 years' time? Will you review it in 5 years, or it'll just be there until you decide that whether they're going to go forward with it?
The detail of how this works is that it'd be received at, associated with the progression of the development, the conversion in this case. We would passport it to the village hall for their use, but there'd be a clause in that, a payback clause associated with the timetable.
Be specifically for the village hall and no other use. Okay, thank you very much. Did you want to come?
Yeah, if I can just clarify what Mr. Worley said there, the time limit would be, if it wasn't expended within that time, it would be returned back to the applicant. That is what it is. It's not a case of we would hold it for that time and then look at it again after that time. If there was a 5 year time limit, for example, to use, it would have to be expended within that time. If not, the applicant could apply to have that returned to them.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Posnett, or would you like a longer time than 5 years?
Could we make that an open-ended time? Could we make that time span an open-ended one?
I think it has to have an end, but there's absolutely nothing drawing us to 5 years.
We could say we'd hold it for 10 years and then, yeah.
sorry if I can just come back again on that. Yeah, so there is no, it's not specified that it has to have a time limit. What it needs to be is it needs to be reasonable and it needs to be proportionate. And generally that is 5 years for most things. So my advice would be not to have it open-ended because it would possibly be difficult to then enforce should you need it. It needs to be reasonable and proportionate. Whether you want to make a decision on that now as to what that time is, or whether you want to delegate that specific part at the time limit to officers in negotiation remains a possibility.
Yeah, I'm happy to delegate that to officers. I don't know whether my seconder will agree.
But thank you for clarifying that. Right, shall we go to the vote now? All those in favour, please raise your hand. 4, 5, 6. That's 6 in favour. Am I? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, 6 in favour. Against? 3. Thank you. That motion is carried. Thank you.
I'm just going to get.
Please forgive us. We'll have a brief recess. Okay. Our second item on the agenda this evening is item 4.1, which was the first one on the actual agenda. It's 20/00470/ land adjacent to Crompton Road, Asferby Hill. I believe it's Mr. Worley who's going to be doing this one. Yes. Okay, over to you.
Could we get the diagrams up again, please? Where we started. Let's just talk you through these. So I think you visited the site, of course, haven't you? So doesn't really need me to explain it. So this is an outline application for up to 100 houses. I'll come back to the significance of up to in a moment. On this land here, on the southern edge of Asferby Hill. Note the blue area, which is the area that's already got a full permission, and I think it's at least partially built. Sorry, it's slipped my memory that it's all built. So this is 100 houses on the remaining of the allocation, which is the red line. Next slide, if I may, please. This is our usual health warning. This is our old friend and indicative plan. So treat with caution, but it's a demonstration of our, in the applicant's view, 100 could, not will, be fit on this land. If it's successful, there will of course be reserved matters, and this will all be rehearsed for real at that stage. And moving on again, please. Oh dear, I updated these pictures and they haven't quite arrived. Right. Can you go back to the slide with red and blue lines then? The one before that. Okay. So the means of access to this site are through the furthest north of the driveways that connect into it. It's Glebe Road, I think, isn't it? Where the leg of the red line heads north east. And the second of those, which is Compton Road, but not the third. And in briefing, I was asked whether it basically splits the site into two halves, so you stuck with your approach being one or the other. The plan I had hoped to show you showed how they actually link together through the blue land. So it does give people options, and it does provide a solution should something be blocked or something like that. I think it can get quite congested in those roads. I think you may have seen that for yourselves at your site visit. In terms of the planning merits of this, this is an almost a perfect fulfillment of the local plan allocation geographically. Returning, as I mentioned, to the figure up to 100, we were asked, and the report tackles it, but I'll try and draw the point out, that when you combine the 100 applied for now with the 31 that's already secure through two earlier decisions, obviously you get a figure of 131, and that's above any figure that you'll see quoted in the local plan. And I know this is something that always concerns us when this equation is presented to us. So in this report, you'll see that I sort of knew the question would be asked. So we've drawn out the particular references from the local plan examination that talked about numbers on sites. And it reiterates there that they're only a measure. They're not a target and they're not a cap. Neither of those things. They're not a positive or a minus. They're just a measure because we didn't know what we were dealing with at the time. And inherently, there's nothing wrong with it differing upwards or downwards, has to be said, from the figures that appear in the local plan. And I would advise against, in this and cases like it, you know, an adverse view taking that it doesn't match up because they're not binding. Now, that doesn't mean nothing matters. It doesn't mean it's a free-for-all, because as numbers, particularly as numbers grow, you know, if infrastructure can't take it, or the environment, or the roads, or the whatever can't take it, and something breaks in the colloquial language and sometimes used, you know, that's perfectly good reason to say too much in itself. But in this case, we don't have that. There's been a lot of work on highways. I had the joy of going through it today when I learned I was presenting, and highways are they've dragged them through the mill, and they're happy with the results that they've found in terms of access to the site and the wider network, the junctions further afield. Schools are happy with it. You'll see there's a little bit of capacity at primary level. It's quoted as 28 in the report, but a developer contribution at secondary level, because I think, as we know, they're already stretched. And none of the other infrastructure providers are saying that they can't cope. Not once 106 is applied anyway. So with all that in the bag, the local plan behind it, it's a very firm recommendation of approval.
Thank you very much. Any brief questions of Mr. Worley before we continue with the speakers? Councillor Chandler.
I don't think he'll be surprised by this one. Severn Trent, have they made any comment? We've got serious problems now outside the Bellway one at Bottisford.
They will have. So I'm struggling for my late arrival with this application. I'm certain they will have, and I'm pretty certain it will say it's okay, because if it didn't, that would be a red flag that runs through this report.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Before we put any, as far as I can see, any of these large applications through, we have to have Severn Trent here to actually say what is going on. At Waltham, we have no water. At Eton, apparently we have no water. All down the Vale, we have no water, and we have live sewage every day at Waltham, every day. And I mean, it's dreadful. And when we have these, we bring these applications in, we have COVID, we're soon going to have something else, I can assure you, if we don't get Severn Trent to actually do the right thing by everybody, because they have a duty when they build a house to put the sewerage to connection to sewerage and connections to water. Doesn't mean to say that the sewerage is adequate or that there's any water. And I really think before we go any further, we've got to do something about this.
I think
It's
Mr.
a
Worley
plea.
wants to respond, and I know that a meeting is taking place.
Yeah, taking the words out on that.
Yeah, sorry.
I think you're invited, Councillor Holmes. It's Severn Trent have been summoned and it's next Friday and we're going to present these issues to them. I saw your invitation go out. Elaine.
I've received mine anyway. Councillor Higgins.
Yeah, thank you. I said this when I was on the phone to Jim. Could you just put the indicative one up? And it might obviously feature part of the debate. And obviously some of the speakers may want to comment on what I'm going to ask, or I know you all know that you know the question I'm going to ask. It's the one with the indicative drawings on. Don't know. There we go. Yeah. So if because there's been lots of mention about cars parked Crompton Road and access and everything else, if the committee is mindful enough, so there's not some bottlenecking on one or the other road to go out, of having a link road through. So if Compton Road was, because it gets narrow and there's lots of cars parked and people are struggling to get out of that one, that they had an option to use the other road to get in or out. That would be something we could try and determine tonight if we were minded to permit. Is that the case?
Yeah, outline is the time when you set those parameters within which they must work, and if that's important to you, now is the moment.
Thank you. Right, no more questions of officers. All done, thank you. If we'd like to move on now to the speakers, I think our first speaker this evening is Dr. David Unwin. If you'd like to come to the table, and once you start, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Is that the one? Excellent. Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I speak on behalf of the residents of Asselby Hill, south as I'll call it, we're south of the main road. We oppose this planning application. Previously, we raised many objections to the plan, and while we feel that some have been met, some still haven't been met, at least adequately. Our objections previously included what we felt was the unnecessarily and morally questionable approach of concreting over greenfield sites, bearing in mind the current environmental catastrophe we're facing, biodiversity loss, destruction of the character and appearance of the village, and critically, which is what I'm going to talk about, road traffic and its relationship to health and safety. The planning application details concerning road traffic are in some part based on data, but primarily hypothetical, and they're flawed in several ways, notably the designation of road types and also some basic assumptions about numbers of vehicles. Critically, the conclusions they present do not reflect the actual lived reality of Asselby Hill South residents living on Crompton Road and Glebe Road. Glebe Road, a 4.7 metre wide, I've measured it in several places, single track road, not 5.2 metres wide, as is stated in the application. This is not a two-way traffic road, it's one way, in a sense of only one car can go up and down at a time. Regularly has around about 10 cars parked on the road because there's not enough space for everybody to get off the road. The baseline assumption in the plan for Glebe Road is that it can accommodate 1,050 cars an hour. That's one car every 3.4 seconds. Those of you who've been there and seen this will realize this is demonstrably impossible. It couldn't cope with even half that flow rate, but this is still the baseline on which the assessment is founded. The 3 streets of Ashby Hill South were originally built to serve about 80 dwellings and a maximum of about 80 cars because everybody had one car in the 1950s. These streets are now filled with 170 cars. I've counted on several occasions, and are seriously congested already. When all the cars are home at night between 5 and 8 in the morning, more than 30 cars end up parked on the roads. That's on Crompton and on Glebe Road. Driving a small car like mine down any of our streets is hazardous. It's well nigh impossible for the refuse lorry, which on a number of occasions hasn't been able to complete its run, and more critically, ambulances and fire engines. God help anybody who has a problem late at night. This is the current situation. According to the planning application, phases 2 to 4 will add another 230 vehicles to our 3 streets, which will then have to accommodate a total of around 400 vehicles. And I've not even included the ones who are just visiting. I'm just talking about residents here. The traffic problems that we have every day will, I think, become quite catastrophic. All 400 vehicles have to enter and leave Ashby Hill South by one road junction where Crompton Road meets the Melton Road. Sorry, the map's gone. This junction is already hazardous. And the problem is exacerbated by cars which are always parked at the top of Crompton Road on either side, creating quite a serious pinch point.
Could I just interrupt you? Have you nearly finished? Because
I have nearly finished. I'm nearly done.
Okay,
Ashby on the Hill is primary school is next to the junction. So many of the 200 pupils and their parents have to struggle through the traffic using that junction to reach the school. The roads become very congested, so those same poor people then have to struggle through the traffic fumes on the way to school. When we go up to 400 cars, this problem is going to be worse. So I would finish by saying our primary concern, it's not just the planning committee, it's all of us, should be to do everything we can to protect the mental and physical health of our children, ourselves, and the environments in which we live. So we would ask the planning committee to help us reach this goal by rejecting this flawed and unsafe application.
Thank you.
I apologise for going over time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? No. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Excuse me. Our second speaker this evening is Sam Silcox, who's the agent.
I think the mic's on, is it? I'm not actually Sam Silcox. Sam, we did email today. Sam is ill, but I'm Adrian Stevenson, the lead consultant, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the applicant. So good evening, Chair and members.
My apologies, I've just looked at the updated list. Thank you.
No problem at all. We'd just like to start by confirming that we fully support your office's recommendation to grant planning permission for the residential development of this allocated site. The positive recommendation presented by your officers is supported by a full set of responses from statutory and non-statutory consultees that confirm there are no technical or environmental reasons why planning permission should be resisted. The site is allocated for residential development in the Melton local plan. This confirms the principle of residential development in this location and confirms that this is a sustainable location in terms of access to services and facilities. The Melton local plan is forward thinking when it comes to the matter of sustainability, recognising that smaller settlements in close proximity to larger settlements are sustainable by association. To ensure this is the case, the applicants agreed to pay contributions towards the creation of school places, early years places, a new GP practice, waste, library services, and a travel plan to encourage sustainable means of travel. The number of dwellings proposed is reflective of the anticipated mix of smaller units that will be delivered on this site. For example, this is likely to include a higher proportion of 2 and 3 bedroom semi-detached and terrace properties and a small number of 1 and 2 bed single-storey dwellings. The final mix and number of dwellings will be confirmed through the Reserve Matters planning application and can be judged at that time. However, the anticipated mix of smaller dwellings would contribute towards readdressing the balance between smaller and larger units in the borough as identified in the Melton Borough Local Plan. This, along with the delivery of a policy compliant level affordable housing, are significant benefits of the proposed scheme. To ensure a robust consideration of all technical matters relevant to delivering a residential scheme in this location, the reports submitted with the application have been based on the maximum number of 100 dwellings being delivered on this site. For example, the impact of delivering 100 dwellings on the safe and efficient operating of the surrounding highway network has been subject to detailed scrutiny, with additional information being submitted during the application to address the concerns raised by local residents. The County Council, as the Highway Authority, as well as other relevant consultees, have all confirmed that 100 dwellings could be accommodated on this site without having an unacceptable impact on existing residents of the wider area. However, this is the subject of a Reserve Matters application to confirm the design would be suitable. In summary, this application delivers an allocated site within the Melton Local Plan. All technical environmental matters have been subject to detailed scrutiny, and we respectfully request that you vote in favour of your office's recommendation to grant planning permission for the proposed development. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Holmes.
It says it's a minimum flood risk at the moment, but we know that global warming is here and it is very different to how it used to be. The minimum flood risk, have you as architects looked at today's risk as to a 10-year, 100-year risk, please? And also, have you also, you say that you've had the highways risk assessment, and are you looking at the amount of cars? You must know as architects how many cars you have and the area in which you'll be able to build everything, because a lot of these houses only have one parking space. Thank you. Sorry, I'm going on a bit, but I just thought I'd ask these questions as they'd come up in my mind. Thank you.
It's okay to respond. Categorically, the new flood standards are set by policy, and that includes the statutory consultees. The new development retains surface water runoff to greenfield rates or flow discharge rates that are restricted by the incorporation of sustainable drainage solutions within the scheme design. So on the indicative layout you've got where we have open spaces shown, there are attenuation ponds that create a betterment flood scenario and flood protection by attenuating the water before it's discharged into the storm system. Okay, so it is such a stringent requirement these days in terms of the ability for new developments to not be causing flood risk to the adjacent neighbourhood and adjacent watercourses. Coming on to the car parking, I'm actually an urban designer and I do understand the sensitivity of that. One thing is that the Reserve Matters application really is the basis to do that, because that sets out the detail of how the houses and the parking will relate. There's lots of arguments on highways because there is a massive argument in government acknowledged professional guidance that street designs can be designed to slow the car down, and sometimes putting smaller roads and things can be seen as a positive rather than putting thundering great roadways through where people drive too fast on roadways. So the point is that the information is provided so that the Highway Authority can confirm if it's safe or not, and they have confirmed that it's safe. However, this is just for the principle of the development in its accordance with the local plan. The Reserve Matters planning application, and I'm sure the officers will back this up, that you, the committee, will have another go to check on that reserve matters planning application if you are minded to approve it. I can only promise you that we'll do our very best to bring you something that is an absolutely superb development, because it's got some very great strengths about it. Absolutely, but I can give you my word that we can't divert from complying with those policies. We have to do it.
Councillor Higgins.
Yeah, just while that debate was going on there, it just prompted. So, okay, this is outline. So just for argument's sake, say you get the permission you want tonight, and then you've obviously got to go through the next iterations. When will the first houses be ready for sale? And when do you think this scheme would be, you know, the first houses ready for sale and the last set of houses ready for sale?
To reassure you, the Crompton Road improvement in terms of the enabling works are due to imminently start. We're just waiting for the final sign off of the deed of variation. So the 16 houses on phase 2 are due to start shortly. In phase 2 provides the link road into Crompton Road, and in phase 1, which is Glebe Road, rights are reserved with services connected already to phase 3. So the plan of campaign really will be to try and get the houses on, or the works moving on site on phases 3 and 4 by next spring. And that will then bring units through within that year. We are looking at, as I say, a more exemplar scheme, but that won't affect the delivery of the site. It's just a considered wider mix of dwellings. But I can assure you, sitting here today, because I am linked with the procurement of the site, we do hope to be on site next April. And generally, the site can deliver around 50 units a year.
So for clarity, end of 2022 houses for sale, and probably a year on after that.
I would hope that, to be honest, we're looking at houses being made for sale by April, by basically by close of play at the 2022.
Any other questions? Councillor Bindloss.
Thank you, Chair. This may be difficult to answer, but what kind of percentage, assuming it goes ahead, what kind of percentage of vehicles do you think will be using the Glebe Road?
It's difficult to give a specific number, as I say, because again, the reserve matters application will dictate that. At the moment, generally a 3-bed property, a 3-bed cottage will have 2 parking spaces. So if, for instance, there was 90 properties on the site, which is indicatively what is being looked at the moment at 2 spaces each, then obviously that's 180 car spaces. That is all integrated though on parking, so that there is less risk that people will park on the highway. That's the other advantage that the scheme bringing forward does. The other thing that I've been experienced with the site since phase 1, but the other advantage the site has brought is obviously the fact that the existing Glebe Road and Crompton Road don't have existing turning heads. So the incorporation of these sites coming forward, they've now got what we call pentagular turning heads where refuse vehicles can turn round. So it's very difficult to go back and put right the wrongs of previous highways. But what you can do is make betterment within your new schemes, create sufficient on-plot parking, provide sufficient roads in the right design to provide visitor parking, and make sure that emergency vehicles and adoptable vehicles can turn round. Crompton Road at the moment, they can't.
Again, if this was to go ahead, which road would you see site traffic using predominantly?
To be honest, it would be, I would expect it to be split, because the desire is to create more of a link. So there's options. So it would be less harmful if both options were considered, so that you don't get all the traffic running through Crompton Road and then nothing through Glebe Road. The sensible solution for the site is to look at balancing it both ways. Normally, again, with a reserve matters planning application, there'd be a condition relative to the site setup and movement and everything that has to be considered relative to that. But I'd anticipate using both access points.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? No. Okay. Thank you very much. Our next speaker this evening is the ward councillor, Councillor Ronnie de Bell. Good evening. I know. Good evening. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. Chairman, thank you. My name is Ronnie de Bell. For the record, I am Warden Parish Councillor for Asfordby, and I'm here in support of the Asfordby community. Members, this greenfield prime agricultural land was identified for development in the Melton local plan. Asfordby Hill, as you know, is a small community, and its allocation of new dwellings in the Grand's original scheme was 72. The MLP allocated the 2 sites, Agenda 1.6 and 2.2, ASFH 1 and 2, to provide 96 dwellings. The inspector changed that to 87 dwellings, clearly had some reservations. Since then, 31 have been built or are under construction, and another 14 have been approved in a separate application just off Crompton Road. In addition, and under the radar, 12 bungalows have been built or are under construction at the garden centre. That members totals 57 from the original 72. This application is asking you to approve a further 100 in this tiny community, which has no facilities at all. Members, this application has come before you because more than 10 letters were received by the LPA, Agenda 3.11, actually 45 letters from members of the public and the parish council were submitted, all protesting about the narrow access roads, potential traffic volume and danger to children and the elderly, which will result, and it appears at 2, 3 and 462, that highways have given their approval to it. And that's apparently based on, according to the paperwork that came out, based on information provided by the applicant. I'm not sure whether highways have actually visited the site themselves. For those of you who have enjoyed the pleasure of visiting the site, you will have seen the junction with the busy A6006, major A46 feature road. You will have seen that it is almost opposite the school and noticed how narrow it is. What you won't have seen are the queues of traffic on wet and misty autumn, winter and spring mornings and evenings that form when the school traffic warden works to get children across the road from the school car park, which is on the opposite side to the school gates. Members, the community appeals to you to stop this application. This application for 100 dwellings should not be approved. It should never be allowed to exceed the original allocated amount of dwellings as in the MLP. And then only if adequate measures are put in place at the access junction with the busy A6006 major feeder road to what is soon to be an upgraded A46 trunk road. Thank you. I'll take any questions if you have any.
Any questions? Councillor Higgins.
Yeah, this came up at the last committee meeting, but we're on about where we're seeing like large applications coming in and probably more than we sometimes expected. But I know you're really involved in the Asfordby community, Councillor de Bell, and also with the parish council as well. Unless I've missed it, but obviously it's got developer contributions and things like that. But is there something that, because obviously lots more housing is coming here, and if it does get permitted, then other facilities will be needed in the Asfordby parish. Is there any request coming from the Asfordby parish for like the community contributions that I know you fight so hard to try and recoup from developers?
No, Councillor Higgins, there's no request for 106 support for anything. Asfordby Hill is a small community, it has no facilities. The only thing that people at Asfordby Hill would be some form of retail outlet building in the area, and I'm afraid I think that's beyond the scope this particular development. One of the concerning things about this development, just to digress slightly, Mr. Worley mentioned it about how much you could put on a site or how many properties you could put on a site. I would argue that putting the amount of properties on this site is actually is cramping them together. So it's making the development a less attractive one, and also making the whole area less tenable.
Of course you can.
Okay, yeah, and would you, because I think from the outline, I didn't see any like play area or whatever. Would you think like any kind of community facility like that, or some green space which other residents may be able to also enjoy? Would that work, or is there something somewhere else in the village? Because I'm trying to think in my own mind, because I've gone leafleting with you in Aswarby Hill before, and I can't think in my mind where that is in there.
Well, there is a small play area already at the top of Crompton Road on the right-hand side, behind a load of trees. There is an application that's been approved for development of that site, which includes the play area. It's a site of self-set trees belonging to the parochial board. They've sold it on, and as I say, there's planning application gone through for it. The part of that application provides for the current children's play area to be expanded and improved. So provided the developers hold good to their word, and I believe they have to, because it's part of the planning process, that there will be an adequate children's play area there. You could argue that the development that we're talking about could have a wider buffer between it and the or some form of buffer between it and the actual countryside, that sort of disguised it from the countryside, because when you drive up the Leicester Road and look across, it's going to be quite a stark, because the ground slopes away towards Kirby Mellors into the village, into the valley. It's going to be quite a stark area there. But looking at I know there are plans to put trees and shrubs in, but quite how that's going to disguise the area is not clear to me.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I hear what you said about it sitting high and going down. So that going down is the Reek, is it not?
Yes, it's in the valley.
It will be the Reek.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and so if we put all this quota of 100 houses, which to me seems unbelievable, but anyway, so holding ponds aren't just going to sit there and hold water, are they? You know, I mean, and then the other problem is, and I don't know it, has there ever been any trouble with sewage at Aswarby Hill?
I'm not an engineer, so I'd have great difficulty commenting on balancing ponds and how they work. Yes, it is downhill and it does go down to the Reek, and the river isn't so far away, because I know from the planning application that Kirby Mellors Church is only 900 yards away, which isn't very far. In terms of sewage at Aswarby Hill, I've heard of no problems with sewage at Aswarby Hill, but of course Aswarby Hill is on a hill and it does tend to run down to the sewage plant, which is at the top end of Melton Mowbray. So I thought perhaps they don't have any problems at Aswarby Hill with sewage.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? No. Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor de Bell. Thank you. That completes our speakers for this evening. Would you like to make comments on what you've heard this evening?
We've got the pictures back now, the right ones this time. So, and it'll help. I can point a couple of things out, particularly some points that were raised by Councillor de Bell. So if you can scroll down to the next one. So this is what I was trying clumsily to describe earlier about how the access would link up. So the bottom of the left-hand extract joins on to the top of the right, and that shows that link going through the blue bit. That's what I was trying to describe. But that's not really what I wanted to pick up now. If we go to the next slide, sorry, it's the master plan slide I'm after, the one above. That's the fella. Thank you. So Councillor de Bille's description of what happened in the examination and how that changed the numbers, that came through the examiner, the inspector's adjudication of the site, and particularly with its the very features he was talking about, actually, about its presence at the top of the valley and the proximity to heritage assets, particularly down in Kirby Bellas. And what she did is said this is going to need a good buffer to give it definition and to stop it the hard edge that Councillor de Bille described, and that in turn gobbled up some of the site. So she adjusted the calculation on the numbers, and it went down by a dozen houses or something like that. Now, none of that is shown on there. So as ever, it's the danger of indicative master plans. But that doesn't mean it's been forgotten or neglected, because if I can refer you to recommendation, condition 13, what we're proposing there, it's all for the same reasoning, is that a 10-metre buffer, planted buffer, is created around the periphery of this site. It says against the hedges, but the site is bounded by hedges, so it becomes the same thing. So 10 metres is ultimately the question to that hard-edged point that was raised.
I've just got a very quick question on that one. The buffer, that doesn't include gardens, does it? It'll be the garden, then there'll be a buffer of 10 metres, and then the hedgerow. Yeah, okay, thank you.
I spoke of parameters earlier. This is a case in point.
Edmund?
Back to the 10-metre buffer, Jim. Is this 10-metre buffer just on the southern edge, or will it be on the eastern edge as well? Because it's not really illustrated there at all, is it? Any kind of buffer?
It's to follow the hedgerows, and again, I'm late to the party, but I understand the edge of this site is all hedgerows, so it takes it everywhere.
I think condition 13 states any amendments to layout approved under condition 2 must retain a minimum of 5 to 10 buffer between the development, including garden boundaries and the boundary hedgerows. So it's throughout the development. But it does say 5 to 10, but you can. No, it does say 5 to 10. So yeah, okay. Any other questions of Mr. Worley before we start the debate? No? Okay, over to you, officer members. Councillor Illingworth.
I appreciate that it's outlined and we're only talking about access, but I think access is at the very core of this, and the numbers come into play on the access. I'd previously seen this site, but I made a point of going again. And yes, Glebe Road is actually the narrower of the two. Crompton is significantly wider than Glebe. And yes, once you head down it, you're faced with a 3-point turn if you're lucky, 5-point turn if you're not so lucky. I'm disappointed that on the highway safety report 4.66 says that the trip generation has been assessed to be 75 vehicle trips in the morning peak and 69 in the PM peak. As an aside, does that mean 6 people aren't coming home every night? I don't know. But 100 houses with a typical 2 cars per household is 200 vehicles, and they're going to go somewhere at least once a day. So I can't see why the figure is at 75 vehicle trips. I just don't get it. I don't think the maths is right. And as regards access, all I can say to the developer is good luck getting your first delivery of bricks down on either of those roads then, because you won't. You'll be forklifting them from the junction. And I think that's really, really quite significant. So the site traffic is going to be exactly the sort of traffic that the residents know already can't get down there. So going back to the numbers, and it's again disappointing to hear that we can't place much emphasis on it because the 85 was a guide, not a cap, not a maximum, but it's a number that we identified and we included in our plan. And here's the maths of it in case anybody else hasn't worked it out. I think I can do it with that from memory. If you take the 31 off the 85, we should be looking at an application for 54, and we're looking at an application for 100. That's 85% more than we'd envisaged. If you look slightly more favourably and take the 100 plus the 31 that are built, giving you 131 against the 85, it's only 54% increase. I put it to officers that whilst our policy and statute allows for variation on that, I think 54% or 85%, depending on how you want to interpret the maths, is pushing that flexibility to and beyond breaking point. I'm very, very unhappy about the proposed numbers and would find it very difficult to support this application, because I think we all know that if we grant permission for up to 100, the plan's likely to come back for 100, isn't it? We don't ask for 100 and not build 100. But I think the site access issue is massively important. Safety of residents and the practicality of getting low loaders, HGVs, dumper trucks on the back of trailers, cement mixers, all that sort of stuff down there. I can't see it happening. Are they going to have to put cones out to stop the residents parking on the street when there is anticipation of delivery? I think site traffic management plan is crucial, and I can't see how it can be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have your hand raised, Councillor Chandler? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Madam Chairman, I would endorse everything Councillor Illingworth said. I probably represent the village where the most building is going on at the moment. And Councillor Pritchett and I have a very frigid link with our electorate. They cannot get their heads around why the figures in the local plan aren't the ceiling. And it's very, very difficult to convince them that, no, it's not the ceiling, it's a guide. Former Councillor Wright and I got the figures in Bottisford down from 600 and something to 400 in the local plan. With what they now call windfall, we're back at well over 500, and another one came in yesterday for 12, so we should be have 600 easily by the time I finish at this council in 18 months' time. I mean, this is ridiculous. You can't convince people that it's right. We can't move in the village. They're going to have exactly the same thing in Osfordby. Last Friday, when I went to look at this site, I couldn't turn right back onto Melton Road. I mean, what are we trying to do? We've got to have more thought going into all this, and we've got to keep to some of these figures. We can't just keep saying, oh, well, it's only another 20%, it's another 30%, it doesn't really matter, that doesn't count. Every dwelling now has 2 cars, some have 3, some have 4. They don't build garages anymore, so half the cars are stuck on the street. I mean, I was, as Councillor Illingworth has aptly said, I was wondering how the builders were going to get down there because some of them have no off-street parking down there. So, I mean, we have to really put people first instead of developers, I think, at times, and we should keep to the figures in the local plan. I'm sorry, but I can't support it either at these figures.
Councillor Bindos.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to endorse as well Councillor Illingworth's comments. I was really concerned with this. The highways are always a concern. I've been down that road 2 or 3 times over the last few days at different times just to check it out. And the last one was today at about 2 o'clock. And I managed to get down Glebe, although there's a bottleneck where cars park at the top and all around the top. And there is just no way on earth that you would ever get site traffic down there. And given that those roads were originally designed for a very small number of vehicles back in the 50s or the 60s, we're now putting a huge amount of pressure onto those roads. And I just can't see how it can be, those roads can possibly support the amount of traffic that we're going to be putting down them. So no, I don't think I can support this either. Thank you.
Councillor Higgins.
Well, yeah, it's quite a difficult one, this. I'd like the officers to actually explain what the windfall number is on houses, because some councillors have, and some councillors are even taken to the Mountain Times to say we need housing for our own first and everything else. So with that in mind, it then goes on that you have to then build more houses. So, and there'll have to be more windfall somewhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be here, but yeah, I mean, if it's 100 houses, I think I read, was it 2025 affordables, which people have been talking about, those on a housing waiting list over the last few days. It's been some unprecedented amounts of comments on social media about all that. So, you know, but you've got to balance all this kind of stuff up. Going back to this particular site, and Councillor de Burgh has made some really good points. What I'd certainly like to see is if you're going to build 100 houses, the community has to really benefit from it somehow. And I think it could be a real missed opportunity if we just allow 100 houses. I can't see any play areas or the other stuff, or contributions to play areas in the Asserby parish. I know Ronnie probably wants to get you know, what did you say, shopping centre or something, but I don't think we'll be able to get that quite here. But it's got to have some more community benefits, certainly if you want to have 100 there, and beyond just the percentage of affordable houses. I think the road infrastructure certainly has to be something that helps alleviate those two roads. Mainly like if the bin lorry, everyone's been mentioning the bin lorry on there, and then it doesn't have to literally go up one road and then go down it, and then, like I say, it has to link through, I think, and have a natural flow through it. But we're only being asked to look at the outline and the access, and I don't think that question is defendable at an appeal stage. However, I think certainly more needs to be done before I feel quite comfortable to say just permit it. Like Councillor Illingworth was saying, you've got to be quite careful of these things. So we've either got to really tie it down, and that's maybe some more negotiation with the ward councillor officers and the applicant. I'd like to know a little bit more how this site's going to work, because like I say, if I permit, and then if I vote to permit and we get 100, yeah, how's the buffer going to work? All that kind of stuff. I'd like more before I'm comfortable with just the outline. So I don't think I'm going to be able to permit, but I do think we have to have some housing in this allocated land. So the question to the officers was how many extra windfalls were from this particular site? Because they said it was allocated. How many extra windfall houses are we getting?
Oh, right.
If it was 100, let's just use 100.
Yeah, I'll bore you with a strict definition first. This isn't the true definition of windfall. This is just exceedance from the measurement that was first applied to the site. Windfall is where it's not an allocated site at all, strictly speaking. But I think Councillor Lingworth did the maths earlier. It was 81. It was the measurement, and with what's already built, this is 131, so it's 50.
Yeah, that answers it. Thank you. So that's my view. I'm just kind of really struggling to quite get the permit, but I don't think we've got enough just to flatly refuse this particular site if it's allocated.
Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you for the opportunity to elaborate. Yes, we are only looking at access, but I think that's the very, very crux of this. It's all very well talking about a link road between the two, so the vehicles don't have to go up and down one road, but they've still got to get to that link. And my point, and Councillor de Burle's point and others, is you can't get to it. I noticed at the end of Glebe that there was a little area where I could have turned round, but couldn't get to it. So we're looking at access, and in my humble opinion, neither access is suitable for this application for up to 100 houses. Now, we can't predict whether it'll actually come back at full for 80 odd, 90 odd. As we've often said, what we're looking at is an outline application, access only, all matters reserved, up to 100 houses. And I don't think the access meets the criteria for the number of houses that are being applied for. So I cannot support it. And the threat of appeal, que sera, sera on that.
Councillor Higgins.
I'm gonna test a deferment because I'm not sensing any permit at the table. And the only reason I'm going to go for a deferment is I'm very loath to go for a refusal if highways aren't backing it, and that's the only reason for that. So I'm going to propose a deferment because for me and probably some other councillors here, and I think Councillor Illingworth is sort of saying this as well, is we'd like a lot more being detailed how this scheme is going to work if the applicant wants 100 or if the applicant's going to choose a different number, and then with that second bite at the cherry, we can be in a position to know what they're actually going for and then either vote permit or refuse at that one. So that's the only reason I'm going to go for a deferment. Don't like deferring it, but I think Councillor de Burle's on the ball. He's very experienced in all this, and the officers, and I think the applicant is willing to work with that community for that.
Councillor Holmes, I do apologise. I've missed your hand raised. Sorry. Did you want to second the motion to defer?
Madam Chairman, when the other houses were built, I think I'm right in thinking when the other houses before, going down the hill, the new houses were built, that was virgin land, wasn't it? It was an old farmyard. It was Houghton's farmyard. And so that is why there was nothing down Crompton Road. There was nothing down these two roads. That is how they got there. And that's how they were built. But in actual fact, now you cannot, it's impossible. And even if it went to appeal, I would think an appeals officer would look at it and say, this is ridiculous. And I would like to propose a refusal because, and you'll say, oh, what's the reasons? The reasons are A, safety off the main road, in and out. It's impossible, totally impossible to get down there with the vehicles that you are going to have to do the development I'm not taking any notice of how many houses. I'm just saying at that area, you couldn't
Could
build.
I just have a point of
The other
order?
thing, do you
'Cause
mind?
We've got a proposal on
The
the
other
table.
thing is that if,
Councillor Holmes, we have a proposal on the table. I'm looking for a seconder for
Yeah.
deferral.
right,
Could I stop you there and then?
I'm just asking, just going to say for the safety reasons of fire
Mm,
and ambulances.
okay.
These are some of my reasons. I could give you more.
Okay, point taken. We need a seconder for the motion to defer. Anybody? Oh, Councillor Smith.
I'm happy to second for the same reasons.
Any other members wish to add? Councillor Steadman, I'm always looking your way, Anna.
Hello. I'm still here. I am so undecided on this one. I agree totally with what Councillor Illingworth said, and I actually agree with what Councillor Higgins has said as well. I think we would all, having had the visit from Highways last week, like them to actually come out and have a really good look at this site and measure the roads and see for themselves and have a full workup. I would like to see Councillor de Burgh working with the applicant, and this is actually one of the few applications where I would have preferred to have seen it at reserves and outline, to be honest. Because once we grant it at outline, then we know it's going to push all the limits, and then it's too late, basically. So I'm still quite undecided.
Any other comments? Looking around the room? No. Well, we've had a motion to defer. I think we'll have to take a vote on that one now. All those in favour, sorry, Councillor Higgins? Yep, your vote, sorry, just hold on. All those in favour of deferral, please raise your hand. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Is your hand raised? 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to raise mine as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looks like, is it unanimous? No, it's not. Councillor Chandler and Councillor, yeah. So that's 9 for deferral. Sorry, against the motion? 2 against. Okay, that is deferred.
Chair, may I just make the comment that I supported deferral in the knowledge of the unlikelihood of a refusal being able to be sustained, shall we say. And for me, the deferral was the next best thing. I was aware that a refusal would possibly the evidence doesn't back a refusal. Our opinions and local people's observations back it, but that's not the same as, you know, statutory consultees being okay. Deferral is the lesser of 2 evils on that front. Thank you.
So that item is deferred, but I would encourage the developers to come back with a better plan, basically, or better numbers, which would fit more in with the indicative numbers that we have in our local plan, bearing in mind what's already been developed. So thank you. The item is deferred. We've closed the matter now. Oh, yes. Yes, thank you. Our final item this evening, and this, are you going to come back? We do have item 5. So, well, we have item 5 on the agenda. Okay, right. Yeah, okay. Our final item on the agenda, and thank you for waiting and bearing with us this evening, is 20/1107/4, erection of business unit at land east of Wolds Farm, Landout Lane, Scolford. And it's Mr. Worley here who's going to address the committee.
It starts it starts at number 5. So it's a couple of beginning, thank you. So again, I'll not dwell on the location because I know you've all had the papers and visited the site. And if we can go down one. The most significant point I want to draw out from this slide, questions we were asked actually, is about how the building itself is proposed to sit centrally in this site, and therefore the distance away from its boundary. And I know there was particular concern about its east boundary where the row of houses begins. I don't have a measurement for that, I'm afraid, but you'll be able to gauge from that plan that we're in the region of, I would estimate, 20 metres. Next, if I may, please. Yeah, so this is an extract from the revised highway study that shows how access will be got. It's hard to pick out the annotations on here, but this also shows the widths of the road and the sight lines. And the point of access, again, I had to catch up and visit today. So the width of the access point is at the very point where Landout Lane gets narrower. It's a little bit wider at its east-well end, and then quite noticeably steps in at exactly this point. And you'll see in the report that we've gone to great lengths to convey Highways' advice on this one, because risk of putting words in their mouth, but they are recognising shortcomings, and they are therefore recommending a concession, so to speak. So what we've tried to do in the report is articulate the reasons why they believe a concession is appropriate in this location. Just, I think, for the record, the next few slides, because you've seen the elevations, if you move on to those, but more importantly, the floor plans, which is the next two. You asked to see these when we, after we visited the site over the weekend. So that's the ground floor plan, which, as you can see, is in the most part open storage. There's a lot of bulky material associated with this business, but also an office suite. And finally, upstairs, it's just storage space, probably less bulky goods. Just briefly on the approach to this, the policy framework, probably easier if I refer to the relevant point of the report, which is paragraph 4.1.3 on page 41. And policy EC2 is the main player in this game. And you'll see from the wording of policy EC2, it is remarkably welcoming of schemes like this, because it's all about developing the local economy. So in principle, and I'll return to the words in principle in a moment, it talks about encouraging the relocation of businesses into the countryside, and indeed new businesses into the countryside. This business is about half a mile up the road at the moment at Piper Hole Farm. I went there today as well, and saw all of the storage and things that go on there. This is a relocation and expansion of the premises half a mile further west. So returning to the words in principle, it is, of course, EC2 is of course subject to all those other details. And to my mind, your debate on this really needs, the principle is almost given to you, us. So the debate tonight, to my mind, is about these finer details about impact on the landscape, residential community and road safety, to name the foremost three that feature in the policy. So we often speak, don't we, about the distinction between principle and details. I think because the principle is so clear under EC2, the debate today is about those details. We're satisfied, based on the advice of consultees, that it is sufficient against those that checklist, for want of a better word, which drives the recommendation. But we do appreciate that the exercise of judgment is needed here on them all, really. I won't add anything further. That's me prompting the debate.
Thank you. Any quick questions? Councillor Higgins.
I'm assuming the applicant probably will speak, so this will probably be a question to them as well as the officers. But in terms of the jobs, because I see there's quite a strong emphasis on the economic benefits of this. So from the officers' point of view about the jobs and what type of jobs as well, because we're not just trying to flood the market with low paid jobs, you know, even living wage jobs either. So how does the planning authority see the jobs for this particular application pan out? And bearing in mind we've had Mars pull out of Asperby Storage and Haulage recently as well. So
yeah, it really will be helpful if the applicant answer that in more detail than I can. I think there's an array of jobs here, from sort of the more basic, dare I say, manual, through to really quite high skilled jobs around project planning and stuff like that. The nature of this business is major contracts, in some challenging major contracts, as in things you've heard of nationally, some of which are quite challenging programs and things like that. So a wide range.
Thank you. We have two speakers, two speakers this evening. The first one is Max Hobbill, who is an objector. Would you like to come to the table, please? It's in the centre.
Is that it?
That's it.
I'm live.
You have 3 minutes from when you start.
Good evening, Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, fellow councillors, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I'm the farmer from Wolds Farm, and I'm objecting to this for the following reasons. The literature states that this is actually in the Eaton Eastwell ward, which is classed as the local plan as an unsustainable policy, SS3. This industrial building is 9.47 metres in height. It's equivalent to a 3-storey building. It's a veranda, glass balustrade, huge roller shutter doors on both sides. It's a sheer mass and size of incongruous in the rural landscape. It's not in keeping with its surroundings, nor does it fit in the location, and is not harmonious in the landscape. Quite the opposite, policy D1. This also goes against the policy quoted to permit of EC2. It's a greenfield site. This land is used for arable crops and classed as a medium to high grade. This application represents the loss of this land to farming landscape. It's in open countryside on a single track gated road. I do not see how the applicants, low loaders and lorries and tractors are going to exit this site and make the turn to Scorford. There is a house opposite the exit. These heavy vehicles will be exiting the Vale via small congested villages. As we heard earlier about Asperby, Scorford also has a problem with parking, and often only has single track. Landyke Lane is a single track Roman road. It's a gated road of which we are entitled to close the gates and graze it. This has always been the case. The contractor who's proposing the site is a national company, taking on contracts with large companies. Surely their site would be better situated where they have good access to the main trunk roads of the country. Your policy, EC2, this is not a rural settlement, it's open countryside. It's a greenfield site, not a brownfield site. It is not the reuse of an existing farm building. It doesn't even represent diversification. And it's not small-scale tourism proposal nor expansion of an existing rural business. It's not small-scale employment development to meet local needs. And it does not represent the use of land for agricultural, forestry and equestrian activity. And it's certainly not an appropriate scale for its location. I therefore ask that you refuse this application on local plan policies SS2, SS3, EC2 and D1. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any questions of the speaker? First one, Councillor Hewson, then I'll take yours, Councillor Illingworth.
Through Chair. Who actually owns the land on the outside of the access point? So on the highway, where the hedge is, who actually owns that grass strip? To the right.
Got it. To the right of the access, I own it, and the access which they've put in the application means the removal of the hedge and a splay putting on my land, of which we've had no negotiation at all, no consultation from the applicant.
Thank you. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you. Yes, you mentioned that about grazing. Yeah, I mean, everybody knows that Landike Lane is a gated road. So are you completely certain that you effectively have, along with other adjoining landowners, do you have common grazing rights to the borders, should I say, of the road? And it would be perfectly appropriate for you to close those gates on that gated road.
Yeah, absolutely. The gate that's there in situ now has been in situ for all my life. My father bought the farm some 64 years ago, and it's always been there. And cattle and sheep have grazed there in my lifetime.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Supplemental? Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming along. Our next speaker this evening is James Lloyd, who's the applicant. If you'd like to come to the table, please, and you have 3 minutes.
Is that the right one? Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chairman, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. As you gathered, I am James Lloyd. I'm the Managing Director of Three Shires. Three Shires is an agricultural, forestry and ecological contracting company which employs circa 35 staff in the Melton area, Melton Borough. And altogether, we continue to carry out much of our work in the agricultural sector. As pointed out by the previous speaker, yes, we do work on some national projects, but we look to take our agricultural knowledge, skill sets, and sort of abilities into the construction and development world for the betterment of habitats and green spaces that are resulting from those some new developments. I started the company on my own in 1995 with a spade and a van, planting up new woodlands in the likes of the National Forest project and what have you. My wife and I bought a house in Goby Marwood in 1997, and we moved into the area from Bottisford. And in 2003, we took the decision to sell the house at Goby and invest in the business. As a result, we moved into rented accommodation in Buckminster, which is where we still live. At the same time, we moved the business to its current location at Pipehole Farm. However, we were advised in late 2019 that we need to vacate the premises by our landlords because they had further plans for the premises. And therefore, we had to set about finding new premises which we could operate from. In February 2020, we contacted your planning department and have since been working with your officers to identify suitable sites and locations for the business to relocate to. This includes identifying and reviewing 17 properties which were advertised for sale, all of which failed to meet the requirements for the business and to potential relocation. Upon identifying the application site, we discussed this with your planning officers who agreed it would be a suitable location to this end. The application before you this evening seeks planning approval for the erection of a business unit with ancillary offices and welfare space to support the business and future expansion. We are committed to retaining existing jobs within the Melton Borough and providing future employment opportunities alongside bringing about environmental and ecological benefits to the site, which I will come to shortly. As reported in the Planning Committee report, the application complies with local and national planning policies, specifically policy EC2 of the Melton Local Plan, which allows for rural employment proposals which create or safeguard jobs. Also policy D1, which sets out the requirements for high quality design schemes. The proposal will support the function and needs of the business while securing a long-term location to grow and expand from. Over the course of the past 18 months, we have employed 10 new staff and seen requirements and see a requirement for further employees to support the ongoing expansion. The operation of the business requires us to be located in a rural location, with purpose-built offices and workspace. The proposal will...
Do you have much more to say because you've had your 3 minutes?
Oh, I'm terribly sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Sorry.
I should have spoken more quickly. My apologies. Sorry, I've lost my thread. The building provides conference offices, welfare space, including changing rooms, showers, toilets, kitchens, workshops, and storage for the operational day-to-day practice, all of which create a high-quality working environment to support the growth of the company, which contributes new environmental employment opportunities within Melton Borough. We're committed to developing a high-quality working environment and, more importantly, providing environmental and ecological benefits. Therefore, as part of our proposal, we have included the following: new lines of native oak trees, extensive broadleaf woodland extensions from the western, extending from the western boundary, additional planting of native shrubs and site along the site's eastern boundary, and further 10-metre habitat buffer zones also on that boundary, suds ponds, habitat ponds, and the inclusions of specific habitats such as bird, bat boxes, artificial badge sets, and barn owl boxes. 3 choices of
Could I
businesses.
stop you there, please? I think you've had how many? You've had 4.5 minutes, so we only allocate 3 minutes. I think we've got the general
My
gist
apologies.
of what you're proposing. Thank you. Any questions of the speaker? Councillor Higgins.
So I've got 2. One was the type of employment and how many jobs in this area, what type of jobs would they be, roughly in terms of between, say, national living wage to, Mr. Worley said, project management. What would that, what's the high skilled jobs that you're looking to create? And then the other one, I'm just actually on Google Earth at the moment with Landdyke Lane, and then obviously where is it, Stone Pit Cottage on the with the bend of, whereabouts exactly would you foresee the entrance of this? Is it where that the gap is at the moment? Yeah, so that's where the entrance is. So it's and forgive me, because I remember driving, so it's only, what would you say, is it 25 yards to the junction where it goes to the 40 mile an hour? Yeah, so and would you be saying your traffic, so would your traffic, the heavier traffic be going to that way, not necessarily all the way down Landike Lane, the single track road? Because that's obviously pertinent. So the question is about what type of jobs and the traffic flow if your application was permitted.
If I may answer those questions back to front, i.e. the traffic first. As we're currently operating at a Piper Hole Farm, which is less than a mile beyond the Sculford Landike Lane junction, all our works vehicles and delivery vehicles come via Clawson Lane. No one is allowed to use Landike Lane for the very reason of the fact it is a single track road. The plan is for all traffic to exit left out of the site to the Sculford Road junction, and then those travelling west turning left onto Clawson Lane and sort of going around the block, as it were. No traffic will be using Landike Lane as a bunny run. As far as the employment is concerned, the lowest paid employee at Three Shires has a basic salary of £25,000 plus overtime and other benefits, and with that also comes a company vehicle. We were talking about Asfordby earlier. My office manager and also one of my project managers live in Asfordby, Asfordby North, I think you'd call it. They are on £35,000 and £48,000 as annual salaries, basics, again with vehicles and other benefits. And everything is a sort of sliding scale in between. I see our employee base as a critical path, a critical element of the business. We look to retain them. We invest heavily on training, whether it be the likes of NVQs or trade specific, so it could be plant certifications, NPAWs, MPCTs and the likes, because we want people to progress and develop. I started the business with nothing. My co-director in 2003 started in the business as just a guy on the ground. He now has a stake in the business. The opportunity is there for anyone who wants to put the opportunity in.
Yes, Kush,
where your current business is, whereabouts did you say it was? Because obviously, if you're moving business, then, because what I'm trying to ascertain is if you're moving business, if your business is already currently located somewhere and it's already using Clawson Lane, I'm trying to work out if you see, because it's not creating some traffic in some areas because it's already there, isn't it? You're just literally, so whereabouts is
sorry, if you go from the junction of Landike and Sculford Road,
yeah,
and travel north towards Eastwell,
which is
yeah, approximately 800 yards beyond Landike Lane left turn, but remaining on Waltham Lane, is Piper Hole Farm.
I can see it actually now on Google. It's put you on there, yeah.
Yeah.
So I know where you are. If anyone else does, I can. Oh, yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask while you're here, what sort of number of lorries and flatbeds will be coming in and out of the new premises, bearing in mind, is it going to be bigger than where you are at the moment, so you'll have more capacity? So there's two questions there, I do apologise.
It's not going to be dissimilar to what we have currently, because we already have that sort of traffic flow, whether it be sort of deliveries of equipment or materials. More often than not, it goes straight to site rather than to the yard. or currently to Piper Hole Farm. We probably have 3 to 5 wagons a week. As far as sort of deliveries and collections are concerned, I'm talking about HGV type vehicles. Unfortunately, sort of 3.5 ton LGVs, so Amazon type vehicles, seem to be a plague for everyone these days. But as far as sort of plant movements are concerned, a lot of the plant actually stays where the jobs are, or go site to site rather than coming back to the yard. But general deliveries, let's say 7.5 ton vehicle size and above, is 3 to 5 a week, maximum 8 to 10 on an isolated occasion.
And will any be parked within the premises? Because I was looking at the plan and the layout, and I couldn't quite understand where some of your larger vehicles would be left.
They were one of the reasons why there is so much of the storage area is actually for sort of safekeeping the plant equipment when it's not on site. We don't run our own HGV vehicles. They are contracted in or by ourselves or whoever's supplying or moving plant around for us. So we're not having our own plant HGV lorries sort of parked up. But the whole idea with the layout is that there is a circular traffic movement around the building with sort of any unloading requirements on the northern perimeter.
Thank you. Councillor Posnett.
Thank you, Councillor Dlancy. I'd just like to ask you about noise. Would you say that you've got a noisy business, and if there are noises that are above certain levels, what precautions do you take place to contain that noise? And the other question is, what sort of hours does your business run?
Certainly, thank you. As far as noise is concerned, on 2 occasions we had noise surveys carried out at our premises. The first occasion, they thought it was a misreading because they couldn't actually record anything, because so much of our work happens away from our premises, if that makes sense. The second reading was taken on a Friday afternoon, when we have more activity as people are coming back from sites and what have you. And that is what the sort of has been put forward within the planning application as far as noise levels and what have you. Yes, we do some fabrications, and yes, we close the workshop doors to prevent that emanation of sort of noise, but it's not high level or constant fabrication by any stretch of the imagination.
The other thing I'd just like to ask is, have you thought of any ways that you can screen what you're doing from your neighbours? So making a buffer that would obviously contain some of the noise, and also if your neighbour decides that he's going to use his rights to open graze his cattle or sheep, how would you deal with that?
Firstly, as far as the sort of visual screening and what have you is concerned, a great deal of consideration was put into the placement and the landscape layout. As a company, our specialism is landscape and habitats. And what we look to do within the application is set up a demonstration area of best practice of implementation and management. And as part of that, there is extensive perimeter woodlands and not just a token screening belt. This is extensive progression into the site in and around the SUDS areas, as well as further habitat features that enhance the area and also add to the screening as well from a sort of an external visual point of view. Hours, our sort of standard working hours are 7 till 5. They fluctuate a little bit, both at front and back end of the day, depending on what time people need to set off to get to sites. But those are our sort of standard hours. Generally, we don't tend to work at weekends because we like our staff to have time to recharge, as it were, and have that sort of work-life balance. But there's usually one or two of us around on a Saturday morning, usually office-based, catching up with quotes or reports or what have you.
And the cattle grazing?
I can't quite understand that one. The reason being where the gate is that potentially could shut the road off is, as I understand it, considerably to the west of the entrance. We're not looking to travel west along Landike Lane. All traffic will be turning left, heading east. So there is no conflict with the potential for grazed livestock.
Thank you. I think Councillor Bingloss is next, and I'll take you for seconds.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Yeah, I found the noise report very, very interesting. One of the things I was going to come back to was particularly the work at weekends. And he obviously gave us examples of the noise for different kinds of equipment, and the items like steel saws and grinders and things that I'm assuming that you would use to repair plant with at the weekends, which would be fairly reasonable. Pretty noisy bits of equipment that cut through the peace and quiet, basically. And I'm thinking about residents locally. How would you go about reducing those particular types of noise?
Firstly, the fitters and engineers don't work at the weekend. So that sort of work is extremely unlikely to be carried out at the weekend. And also the building design is insulated, and the sort of workshop area has the shutter doors, which will be then closed certainly on the south elevation, and more often than not on the northern elevation, where all the repair type work will be carried out. So for a standard sort of 4 or 6 inch grinder within the building that is insulated and 60 or 70 yards away from the nearest residence, the noise levels are going to be exceedingly low. And also we're only talking about between 7 and 5 weekdays. And it's not something that's happening constantly day after day after day.
So there's not much work going on at the weekends then.
No.
I did also notice in the report that there were occasions, and I suspect they probably are just occasions, where you'd be having early starts, 4:30 starts in the morning. And I'm particularly thinking here, I mean, these guys will just come in, I suppose, and pick up vehicles and go. But obviously the car park that they'll be parking in is next to properties. So how regularly do you think you would have that?
The sort of 4:30, 5 o'clock starts are actually pretty well a thing of the past. This is when we're working on the Rampion Wind Farm project down in Brighton. And it was a case of those that were tasked with working on that site were turning up at the yard Monday morning, that sort of time, to then travel down to site. They would stay down there for the whole of the week and then come back on a Friday afternoon. So it was a one morning a week incident, and we've got nothing like that sort of a project going on and haven't had for the last 18 months.
Thank you.
Councillor Higgins.
It was probably a question to, sorry, lots of questions to you here, to the applicant and probably Mr. Worley, is because the applicant was saying there's been a lot of work with officers to identify a site, and I think I'd just like to explore that a little bit from what Mr. Worley may know and the applicant. So what sites were looked at and what were discounted and why?
We've looked at industrial areas. Usually they've either been too small in their entirety, or it hasn't provided the office space, or it hasn't provided the secure storage ability either. The one problem that we have had up at Piper Hole Farm is a number of break-ins which have been extremely expensive to cover, as it were, albeit by insurances and what have you. The nature of what we do, a lot of our equipment is easily stealable because of its size, and so therefore we need a decent enclosed secure area, but we also need quite a lot of office space, and finding premises that has the ability to provide both has been very difficult indeed. We've looked down at the old coal mine down at Asford, what have you, bags of space, zero security. And we've looked at sort of small holding farms as well. More often than not, their problem is access because of the sort of vehicle movements and what have you. We have actually scaled that back because now all staff have their own vehicle or van. So it could be a Fiesta or it could be a pickup. So we don't now have the coming in own cars and then picking up other vehicles. So in effect, we've reduced vehicle movements by half, or numbers by half. So we've looked in a very sort of eclectic parameters of sites, but we've also been constrained by Melton itself, because so many of our staff are within Melton, or some are as far out as Bourne or Hinckley or Bingham or what have you. So Melton is the hub. So we can't go too far beyond, otherwise we start losing staff that we've invested heavily in, that have been with us a long time, because their commute is too great.
Thank you. I think before we go any further, I think we need to have a vote on suspending the standing orders, because we're coming up very close to our 9 o'clock curfew. Could I please ask for a proposer and seconder? Proposer?
I'll propose.
Thank you. Seconder? Thank you very much, Councillor Pindlos. All in favour? Thank you. Sorry to have interrupted you, but we're going past our 9 o'clock curfew and I'll get into trouble. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, yeah, Councillor Hewson.
Just one point then. Obviously, security is a major problem. Do you envisage possibly in the future wanting to actually have somebody on site?
No.
No.
Is that everybody? Yes, of course you can, Councillor Chandler.
Does that mean you're going to have floodlights on all night, low level lights?
No.
How are you going to secure it then? Because your cameras have got to have low level lights. We've got cameras, but we've got to have low level lights with them.
There is a specific lighting. Sorry. There is a specific lighting, low impact lighting plan in place with the design that are all downlighters, but not spreading lights. I'm afraid I don't know the specific terms, but it will be more infrared cameras on the sort of premises of the buildings. They will be on timers. They won't be on a. No, we can set them so they turn off when they actually, I don't know, let's say sort of 8 o'clock in the evening, middle of the winter or what have you, because there's no need for them to be on. God, we know all about that, but I mean, we've got sort of infrared, as we have at Piper at the moment, infrared cameras, so we don't actually need the floodlights because they work in the dark. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I must apologise, but we have given you quite a bit of a grilling this evening. Any other questions at all? Thank you very much. Thank you for being patient with us. Would you like a 2-minute comfort break? I'm just thinking the same myself, actually. So we'll have a 2-minute comfort break. Well, it's probably 3 minutes, I think, to get to the loo and back. Okay. I'm not cold. I'm not a nip to the loo.
Start coming here and nip it and
Welcome back, everybody. So we're now back in session in the meeting. Officers, I think I've lost track of where we are now. Officers, did you want to come back and say anything following the grilling that we've No, I know. Thank you. Members, any questions of officers before we start the debate? No. Right, over to you, members. Councillor Chandler, almost missed you there.
Thank you. To me, this is a great proposal, but it's in the wrong place. It's a greenfield site in an unsustainable location. The height of the building frightens me in that location. I'm worried about the single track gated road. Car parking and heavy machinery, which are going to be close to a very attractive house. When I went to look at the site last week, there were people outside photographing the floral display. There's also something that we should put into consideration, and that is the bleeping of heavy machinery when it's in for servicing and even going out onto lorries. it's a requirement of law that you have to have a bleeper on things. And I'm getting absolutely crazed by people in Bottisford complaining about builders who've got these dumper trucks that as soon as they reverse, it's bleep, 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 bleep. And they've even had timers on them. And fair dues, they don't work on a Sunday, but they get it all Saturday, often well into the afternoon. We have 41 hectares of industrial land allocated in the local plan. I still work in acres, and it's about 75 acres in Melton, and the other 30 are in the rural areas. And I still maintain that this proposal should be on one of the industrial sites. If we don't soon start building on these industrial sites, nobody will come, because it's one that if somebody starts, we'll get a chain of people coming, but until we get one person, nobody will come. And this is an ideal proposition for one of these industrial sites. And I think I'm right in saying, Mr. Wally, it is 41 hectares, isn't it, in the local plan? So I'm afraid I can't support the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you. Yes, far be it for it to be our wish to stifle enterprise and such, but I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Chandler that despite the apparent merits of the scheme, shall we say, in terms of planting or what have you, I just think it's the wrong place. I just think, Councillor Chandler's comment about, we have allocated industrial, we have brownfield sites, and we have allocated areas for commercial and industrial expansion. And that didn't include just outside Scorford, to the best of my knowledge. I'm loath to, say to be perceived as stifling enterprise, but and I understand that the applicant states that they've looked at numerous sites, and I don't dispute that they perhaps didn't find anything that suited all their needs. But that doesn't make this one right for the location that it's in. And I would have great difficulty supporting it, despite the fact that I don't enjoy going against office recommendations, but I can't bring myself to say yes to this one. Not unless I hear something in the ensuing debate that makes me swing.
Councillor Hewson.
Has the applicant had been shown the allocated sites that we've got for industrial use in our area? I can't say with my hand on heart, but I would have thought that's pretty much the starting point. Yeah, and then move away from them rather than an afterthought.
Councillor Higgins.
Yeah, I think really this is, as I was alluding to in the question, I actually hadn't given the appreciation of where the current business is, and bearing in mind it's not moving very far. It's still, as Councillor Illingworth says, it's not ideal. And I think I said to Mr. Wally in a conversation, I'm surprised Highways have come up with what they have, but. And whether the entrance, because you could probably, but even if you move the entrance, there's, nearer to the wider part of the road, then it creates other things. But we do have to look at what jobs are we trying to attract in the area. And it is my belief from what the officers have said that obviously they've tried to work with the applicant to try and find a suitable location. And I think the applicant did explain why they had discounted various things. I don't know too much about the Asforby Business Park, why security couldn't be done there, but I'm just have to take that at face value. That all said is, you know, the 70 jobs, some really good jobs. You know, that's what we are trying to aim for. And I think with, as I said earlier, with Asforby Storage and Haulage moving out, it's a very difficult one. And I think really it's one of these few ones that we have these days where it's probably one of these balancing things. And I think that's where Councillor Illingworth was coming from as well, is there's some real merits with this, and there are some real issues with it too. But for me, it's the economic argument and the jobs I'm just a bit concerned about if we don't find somewhere for it. And so I don't think I could support a refusal tonight. But I whether we needed more in the report of what's actually been taken, of where to look at, because I just think if we're throwing away a lot of these higher paid jobs with vehicles, and you know they were saying about that most of the employment was within Melton and Asforby, and you know project management nearly up to £50,000. We don't really attract those kind of jobs, and the only way we're going to attract those jobs is for businesses to win business on a regional and national scale. We're not going to win the big jobs, big well-paid jobs just within the Melton Borough. We're going to have to go out and compete on a national scale, and I think that's what this company is trying to do. But it is a very difficult one for councillors here. It's not an ideal site because, as Councillor Illingworth said, but I'm just very concerned about the stability for the jobs, and because it's not really moving that far. The vehicle movements are largely just substitution, and we'll be using largely the main roads that they're using already.
Councillor Illingworth, you had your hand raised.
Thank you. Yes. I mean, the commercial argument is the bit that's the dilemma for myself as well. But would it not be the case that if we were to refuse, the applicant may look harder within the borough? I don't think they're looking to decamp out of the Melton vicinity. And there does seem to be a slight element of doubt as to whether our available land has been examined, shall we say. But if it were refused, and if the applicant did look harder and still came up with nothing, then that could come back with a reinforced argument for the existing application that they've tried yet again. So I don't think all would be lost on the job front. But it's a hard one. It's a hard one. It's as hard as 1,000 houses.
I must admit, I don't often speak about applications, but in this particular one, I think I share Councillor Chandler's view on it being an unsustainable area. But if we were minded to permit it, I have a problem with the design of it as well. It may look very nice on paper, and it does look very nice on paper, and I sort of commend you for that, but it has little regard for the neighbouring residents. I don't understand why you've got the office building on the left-hand side where there's no residents nearby, and you've got all the coming and going and the large up and over doors, etc., the sort of the iron doors. That's right next to the car park, which is right next to Stone Pit Cottage. It probably would have worked better if it was swapped over the other way, so you kept the noise away from the cottage and from the other neighbours nearby. I just think that's, perhaps I'm reading the plans wrong, but I just think it's a bit strange. But anyway, I'm very sorry you can't address the committee, sorry. I'm just very mixed up with this. I find it very, very difficult to make a decision on it, to be honest. Councillor Hewson.
I agree with Councillor Illingworth here that possibly if we could just try and
get a better appraisal of the actual industrial sites that we've got, you know, in the Melton Borough. It seems a shame that we've allocated sites and we're not using them, as against using greenfield sites. And yeah, I just think it's something perhaps should be pursued. Thank you. So the land holdings that make up the 40 hectares that Councillor Chandler spoke to are mainly in just two places. One is Ashford Business Park that the applicant spoke about earlier, you know, down in the old mine site, and the other is the Greenfield site, Leicester Road, at the very western fringe of the town. There's 20 hectares out there. There's bits and bobs around the place, but policy it's not all about allocated sites, because policy framework that this application brings us to is a permissive policy rather than a directive policy. It's open-ended, allowing previously unexpected applications to come forward being assessed against the criteria that it lays down.
Councillor Higgins, were you? Okay. Councillor Smith.
I think I would be minded to permit the application because in the recommendations for conditions, there are several bullet points outlining what can be done to reduce the noise levels, such as beepers, reverse alarms, and decibels that the business can't sort of go over during specific hours. And I also think on the point of the designated areas for these businesses, I just worry that if we push too hard, we're going to end up driving him away. And you know that is 70 jobs that Melton does need. You know, it's opportunities for young people, opportunities for progression for others. You know, I wouldn't want to lose something like that.
Councillor Higgins.
Okay, I don't know if Councillor Smith, I nearly used your former name then, so forgive me. Councillor Smith will support me in this one. I don't like doing another deferment, but I do sense, including in myself, but I do sense the committee needs some more information. I don't think there's enough for refusal, so I'm not going to go there. And I hear what Councillor England is saying, but I think with the deferment, the only thing I would like to know more is whether the economic development manager could submit a report of what they've actually done on it and the whys and wherefores, because I do think, as Mr. Worley said, it's a permissive policy, so it's not as directive, but so I don't know what anyone thinks of that, but I'm struggling to refuse it, but just because of the economic benefits and that alone. So I'd like to know whether we could, because either if we agree it on this site, but as you said, Chair, maybe move things around, that's one thing, and I don't mind that being looked at in the deferment, or whether we're looking for another site. Entirely, but I think, as Mr. Worley says, if the economic team have gone through that already, but it might be that they just put that in writing because I can't quite see it in the report. So I'm going to propose a deferment. Happy to add things in, but I'm happy for the site to be looked at from what you said, Chair, and a report from the economic team of what their particular view is, either on this site or other sites that have been discounted.
Councillor Posnett.
Thank you. It's not very often I agree with Councillor Higgins, as you very well know, but I must agree with his reasoning tonight, because it is the jobs and the wages that are paid. One thing I did think about asking, and I never thought about it earlier, but sitting here just learning about things, was opportunities for apprenticeships for young people that would have a job that appears to be one that they could actually work up the ladder to get a really well-paid job. And we all know that Melton's a low-wage economy, and the sort of industries that we've got at the minute are not the types that pay huge wages. If we were going to defer it, and I really don't know which way I'd vote at the minute, because I know Landite Lane, I used to live at Abkettleby. You know, I used to be friends with some of the Hobills that live down there. So, you know, I've travelled Landite Lane lots of times, so I know what it's like. And I have travelled down it and opened the gates down it to be able to get through. So I know it's true that we do, they do lock the gates, they do put the gates on occasionally. But if we were, would it be brought back to the next meeting? Because I don't think that this can go on indefinitely. There's got to be a decision made, and a decision made quite quickly, and not for any other reason other than to give him the opportunity, if we are going to refuse it in the end, to be able to find somewhere for his business to go and hopefully to stay in the borough.
So are you seconding a deferral? Oh, okay, so I was looking for a seconder because Councillor Higgins proposed a deferral. So we're looking for a seconder for that one. Councillor Smith, I saw your hand. Councillor Bindloss.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that. I think it's a sensible solution. We need to be seen to be supporting local businesses, but equally, we have to look at all the options, especially for the residents. Yeah, I'm completely in agreement with Councillor Higgins.
Is the proposer and seconder willing to include re-looking at the landscaping plan and perhaps moving the trees to protect Stone Pit Cottage and the other cottages opposite, as opposed to where they are at the moment?
Yeah, more than happy with that. And
moving the
in
car
theory,
park, because
yeah,
I know the car park was problematic for some people.
As I say, you know, I'm fairly happy to keep it even as much open-ended as anybody needs to, including if the applicant wants to move entrances, car parks, the whole thing.
Okay.
And I know that might involve more costs and all the other stuff, but I do recognise the concern some committee members, including yourself, have there.
Thank you. Well, we have any more join us to the debate on this one? Anything else to comments? Nope. Okay. Well, we've had a motion to defer based on to look at the landscaping, etc., of the site, plus to investigate other locations and the background papers that we really haven't got in on this particular application. So I'd like to take a vote on that one, please. All those in support of a deferral, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can't see your hand up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, 5 in favour of deferral. Against? 3 against. Okay, thank you. That is deferred. And I would encourage the applicant to take the comments on board tonight that they've heard. Thank you. Right. Got item 5. Sorry, I've got one more to go. Yeah. No, yeah, item 5. We have the development manager performance report. And it's just for committee to note. But if, I'm going to take some comments if anybody wishes to comment on it. Oh, no. Did you want to come back, Councillor Steadman and Councillor Holmes? Oh, it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
But under the circumstances, I think we've done really well. And we should be happy with how things are continuing in this vein.
Personally, I think it makes good reading, and please pass my thanks, and also, let's say, the committee's thanks to the team for their hard work, plus their commitment to the change we have been making since the planning review and all the various other changes you've had to deal with. Your new planning systems, your new software. I know we've had glitches, but you've done a really good job. So thank you very much, everybody. So I think we'll all just note the comments, note the report. Absolutely brilliant. So thank you very much, everybody. I have no idea what the time is. It is now 9:25, so I close the meeting. Thank you. Oh, it's not. It's going home for a cup of tea o'clock.